IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown podcast live on a Friday, which of course means little Notre Dame recruiting hour talk. Ryan Roberts, director of recruiting here at irishbreakdown.com, at Rise and Draft on Twitter, joined by my guy, Mr. Sean Davis, co-host of the Lucky Lefty podcast. Make sure that you go check out Lucky Lefty podcast on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms. I know also they have their YouTube channel as well. I was actually just watching them live on YouTube before the show even kicked off here, kind of prepping things behind the scenes here. But we're going to be talking a lot of 2025 recruiting. I know there's some buzz about a 2024 commit or 2024 recruit that Notre Dame is taking a look at that's visiting later this month. We could talk about that, guys, in the mailbag if people want to ask about Kevin Humes, who's the defensive back out of St. Francis Academy in the state of Maryland. We could definitely hit on him a little bit, but we are focusing exclusively on 2025 class and the front seven today, Sean. We're going to talk about defensive line. Notre Dame is obviously onto a very fast start of the defensive line. We'll talk about a couple of the pieces that y'all need to know about as we finish up the class. We'll also maybe hear from a potential commits that is already, a player that is already committed to Notre Dame, a little previous interview that I've done with them. We'll also kick off linebacker recruiting, which is going to be a very interesting topic because there's a lot of guys that I would say Notre Dame's in a pretty good early spot for. But like last year, it was a lot of names, and we just kind of need to cycle in who are the guys that Notre Dame's really pushing for. So we'll give you the names that you definitely need to know. There's also a linebacker that is currently visiting South Bend, Indiana, as we speak, braving the cold, Mr. Josiah Kia out of the state of Hawaii. So we'll talk linebacker recruiting. I also have a really cool interview with a linebacker that is on the board for Notre Dame, a guy that Notre Dame seems to value heavily. So we got two interviews for you all today. We'll also hit the mailbag at the end, so throw the mailbags in the chat at any time. By the way, Sean, we just have plenty of surprises for these folks today because we might have a special guest joining us for a mailbag, giving you a little bit of a Notre Dame player perspective. So we'll get all that to you all today. Always, as I start this show, though, Sean, can't skip over, man. How are you, my friend? How's everything going in Sean Davis land?
I wish I could turn the computer, bro. I wish I could. I'm a winter person, right? Ryan, I'm a winter person. So let me explain. My wife is in California with my daughter, okay? And I was supposed to go, but I had to stay to handle some things back here. I wake up this morning, 6 inches of snow overnight, another 4 inches on the way. All the schools are closed. High schoolers and teenagers are walking around with shovels trying to hustle. And of course, I stepped out and said, hey, right here, I'll give you $40. Just shovel the snow. I don't have to worry about that. I can hibernate all weekend, relax until I have to go out for Sunday morning worship. And I'm going to watch probably a couple of Notre Dame games from the year and rewatch some things and watch some film and go over the 25 guys that'll be coming in for the visits, just checking their film out so we can talk about them in the future. And
yes, sir.
It's lovely, man. Now, the only thing is I have to order in groceries. So that's going to be interesting because they might hit me with like a $15 surcharge because of the weather.
Is that how they do that? That's how they do it?
I think they do. I usually get my groceries from Walmart, and it's usually free. If I just let them come within 3 hours, but they might surcharge me because of the snow, and that's fine. That's fine because I refuse to pay DoorDash and Uber today. I refuse. I'll cook my own meals. Yes. And see, when it gets cold, I have to battle with. I don't know if you go through this. I have to battle with my wife because she loves it warm and I love it cooler in the house.
Same.
So when it gets cold, she wants it up to like 78. And I'm like, no, that's
78.
Oh
my gosh.
It's like the tropics in here, double R. As long as I can get 69, 70, I'm great.
Yeah.
I'm great.
Well, I know it's not in New Jersey. It's not as cold as where you guys are, obviously, but it's been very cold the last couple of days. So we have our heat cranked up to like 72, and like that's a little high for me, man. Like I'm more like a 68. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a 72 guy. It's not me.
She pumps it up to. I'll say the range is like 75 to 78. She pumps it up, puts on a hoodie. Right when she pumps it up, I'm like, oh man. Then she gets upset when she starts sweating. It's like, really?
She's trying to overheat herself, man.
Man, look,
That's yeah. Oh man.
she's been
Oh
like
man.
that since the first day I met her. We knew
That's
going
wild.
right before we got married, like, okay, we're gonna battle over
Okay.
the heat and the air conditioning in the house. So,
Man.
but
So
I'm about to was nippy, nice.
quick note. Quick note before we get into defense. So that actually reminded me. We used to have me and my wife. Her best friend used to live with us when we first started going out, like many moons ago now. At this point, I guess. But Sean, they were the complete opposite. They would drop the temperature down to like 58,
Oh,
60. I'm like, brother, like I like it cold in the house. I just said like 68 is like a perfect temperature to me personally in the
mm-hmm,
household. But like 58, trying to
mm,
freeze me out, man. Like, no, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. So it's very interesting how people are so different. People even get like those weighted blankets now that are like they're cold, right? So like
yeah,
you get kind of that
get
coldness,
that
but then
coldness.
you
Yeah.
put the blanket on top so it like regulates the climate, I guess. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how this stuff actually works, but yeah. So yeah, that's it's interesting how everyone's so different. But we're gonna get into defensive line talk now, folks. And again,
Do it.
mailbag questions at the end. So we have a cool guest. I think is gonna be pretty fun to have them on during the podcast today, especially during a mailbag section. So mailbag questions at any point. Sean, let's talk defensive line recruiting.
Let's do it.
2025, Notre Dame is off to a fast start. I mean, it's kind of close to being done. And we are in January of 2024, talking about a 2025 class that won't sign for a very long time at this point. I mean, what, 11 months they're not going to sign for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And despite that, Notre Dame has commitments currently because we know that Christopher Burgess had just committed, during the All American Bowl last weekend on Saturday. So you now have Christopher Burgess. You have CJ May out of the state of Alabama. You have Davion Dixon, who was actually the first player to commit in the class for Notre Dame in 2025, defensive tackle out of the state of Florida. You also have Joseph Reif, who's an Illinois guy that I know you
Yeah.
know very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Notre Dame also has Dominic Kulak, he's more of a linebacker that can also play defensive line. Like he's a linebacker viper type. So I am tentative to even including him in this conversation, Sean, because is there a situation where Dominic Kulak ends up as a full-time Viper on the next level? It's possible. I mean, his body could develop into that. But I personally, because I think I'm a little bit higher than most people on Dominic Kulak, but I think that he is a perfect movable chess piece on the second level. I want to blitz him from the interior, which we know that Al Golden likes to do a ton. I want to put him on the edge in certain scenarios, like they did with Maris Loifel at time during his time. I think Kulak is just he's a very kind of diverse football player, a guy that you can lose in a lot of different areas. So I'm actually a little bit hesitant to even include him in this conversation, but we will just for argument's sake. We're either way.
Yeah.
Sean, what did Marcus Freeman immediately when he got to Notre Dame? What did he preach about what he wanted to do defensively? As far as what was he looking for? A couple things he was looking for. Length. Yep.
Athleticism. And he definitely wanted to have 1A, 1B on the depth chart. Like he didn't want a big disparity in between the talents.
Perfect. Exactly what I wanted you to hit on, Sean, because yes, he wants to get longer. He wants to get more athletic, and he wants to get a little bit more versatile on defense. He wants guys to be able to move around a little bit. And so far in the defensive line class, Notre Dame in 2025, you got a whole mess of that, man. I mean, guys, I did a film room on Christopher Burgess. There's this one play, Sean, where he was making a play in pursuits where you kind of see him sprawl for a tackle. And you're just like, dude, that dude is stupid long. Like he is long as heck and explosive. You also have CJ May, who, by the way, really good basketball player. CJ May is a really, really good basketball player. 6'4", 225 pounds, probably Viper early, maybe big end eventually. Like he is a very talented athlete as well. You have Davion Dixon, who's more of the nose tackle in the middle. You have Dominic Kulak, who's kind of a movable chess piece. And not to mention, I don't know if you saw this, Joseph Reif, who I'm not like super high on, but he's up to 250 pounds now.
Right.
So the vision that the staff is selling as far as I think that they think that Joseph Reif, while he might be a strong side defensive end early on in his Notre Dame career, he is a player that could eventually be that Riley Mills track of eventually being a 3 tech, maybe being 290, 300 pounds, which I think they might be right on. We'll see. I I still question the take as early as it was, but ultimately, I'm going to wait back and I'm going to see if they were right about Joseph Reeve. They obviously like him a lot. So
You
now
know
the
what?
question is,
Go
yes.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go. You go.
No, I just want to tap into that and just talk about, what the changes that are being made and what they want to do defensively in the future, because you can see the length and athleticism, but you could also see the plans that they have for these kids. And I remember when they went after Dominic Kulak, a lot of people were like, "No, who is this kid?" Right? And immediately the feedback I got from local area coaches were, "Yo, you have to come see this kid play." Like
Yep.
they move him all over the field. So like even in high school, he's a versatile kid that attacks second level,
Yeah.
outside. They blitz him inside. Like, dude,
He plays tight end
offensively,
on
this plays
offense.
tight end
Like,
on offense. Like,
yeah.
this is an athlete, right? So if you want, we say like Notre Dame just needs more football players. Okay, you have one. Forget what the star rankings say. Notre Dame has identified a football player,
Yep.
and he's a Chicago kid. And they're establishing and planting that flag with Hulock, Cam Williams, Christopher Burgess Jr. Now they're doing what they need to do, and their presence is starting to show up more in Chicago, which is absolutely fantastic. You talk about Joseph Reed. Look, they have a plan for him. He's already up to 250. So is he going to be big end eventually?
Could be.
It does. Is he able to get up to 280, 290 eventually, and maybe move inside or kind of have the same career that Riley Mills had, starting
Yep.
outside and eventually being able to play a little bit inside, and we'll
Right.
talk about some of the other prospects, inside, but it's clear that what they've done, like you said, with Burgess, CJ May, Hulock, Reed, the plans they have the anchor and Davion Dixon. I think they're going to continue to get you would love to get two anchors per class,
Yes.
like Davion Dixon, but if you don't, get one per class and then go and get other guys that you feel can grow into the position, because you do have depth that you can
Yep.
develop right now from the previous two classes. So, man, you have to be super excited about what they're doing, with the length and athleticism and versatility on the defensive line starting out this 25 class.
Agree. And there's a next step too to it, right, Sean? Like there's a next
Mhm.
step as far as how do you finish up this class? Because I mean, look, if we count Dominic Kulak as a defensive lineman, if you count him as a Viper traditionally in the sense, you now have one, two, three, four, five defensive linemen, right? I still count it as four because ultimately I
Mhm.
think that Kulak gives you that flexibility where you don't have to put the number in pen right now. Like you don't have to do that. But ultimately, I think that there could potentially be two spots left here, Sean. And there's guys on the board that we've hinted on before, right? Like we've talked about, like for instance, we talked about Isaiah Campbell out of North Carolina. We've talked about Matthew Johnson out of De La Salle out there in California. But there are really two guys that it feels like, and if you're on the message board at boards@irishbreakdown.com, should have mentioned this before because you mentioned it already. On the 20th for the junior day of this month, there's going to be a host of very talented recruits on targets on campus. There's a running list on there, by the way. So you should go to make sure to check in on who is going to be at Notre Dame next weekend for the junior day. But Sean, so those couple names that we'll talk about, like we're not going to talk about those guys as much in depth because they're guys that we know Notre Dame has been in contact with. They know that Notre Dame has liked, but there just isn't a ton of traction right there for different reasons on both
Mhm.
sides. There are traction though on two particular players, one edge player, a Viper, and one interior defensive lineman that I'm very interested to see what happens with him down the line for Notre Dame. The first guy, and let's hit on him because we've been talking about him all last 4 months. It feels like Damian Shanklin,
Mhm.
who another local kid. He's out of Warren Central in Indianapolis, Indiana. 6'4", 230 pounds. Some list him at 6'5". Sure, I know you've seen the film though. I remember we were texting about it, what, like a month and a half ago now at this
Mhm.
point, and
Mhm.
you're like, I think you said something like, "Bro, Shanklin." I'm like, "Yeah, man, pretty
Yeah.
talented football player." So let's start the conversation with him because he's obviously a very talented football player. He fits into the profile we're talking about. Long and explosive. Long and explosive. That kid, he's ranked as pretty much a consensus top 200 player in the class. But I think ultimately, Sean, he could be a top 50 kid when all is said and done, man. I think he has that type of upside to him.
Yeah, he's a late bloomer, right? It's like because
Yes.
when we finally looked at his film, we were like, "Oh snap! Oh yeah, yeah, we need to get in on him." And it's something that you haven't seen He's a game breaker defensively. When was the last game breaker we saw? I didn't say last player that just, Kyle Hamilton was a game breaker.
Right.
Before him, would you consider Foskey a game breaker?
At times, he
At
wasn't
times,
consistent with it, but like at times,
right.
yeah, Foster was a game wrecker. Yeah,
So the last game breaker might have been. Do we have to go all the way back to Jalen? And we're not saying they haven't had great
yeah,
players defensively. We're
sure,
just talking about
sure.
game records that just
Guys that can take over a football game, right? Like
yes,
not
yes,
just a great part of a not a great cog to a machine, a guy that
right.
literally, if you don't worry about him, he could ruin a football game for
Ruin
you.
a
Yeah,
football game.
I think that's safe. I think it's safe to say, yeah, Jalen Smith's probably a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So he has that type of talent. You watch this kid's film and it's like, oh my God. And then now you're in a battle. This seems to be the battle with all of these kids, right? Michigan, Ohio State. No, like Notre Dame knows. Like, okay, these are the teams we're fighting for
yep,
the guys that we want and the must gets. And there's no difference with Damian Shanklin, right? And we hear good things about the relationship that's being built. Damian Shanklin, you talk to him, he says great things about the school and the coaching staff. So, it's going to come down to, like, I think one of the greatest misses, in my opinion, was Kenneth Grant. Like, he's right there in your backyard in 22.
Was he an
And
Indiana kid? Was Kenneth Green
yeah,
an Indiana kid?
out of Maryville High School,
Wow.
and that might have been like the transition for
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman, but he was still on the defensive staff as a defensive coordinator. It's like, yo, and that kid dominated. He dominated
He's
in the
exactly what
state.
you're looking for too, man, as far as that
He's
size
exactly what he's
profile.
looking for and need. And so, we
Yeah.
talk about Chicago, we talk about Indianapolis and Indiana. Like you have to get those dudes from those areas as Notre Dame. You're the biggest brand. You're the closest brand. And Damian Shanklin is no different when we're talking
Yep.
about that.
Yeah, and his offer list is continuing to expand. A lot of great programs are looking at him. Again, you don't miss you don't get the profile all the time of the length and the twitch that Damian Shanklin brings. And Sean, the crazy part is that he's already 230 pounds. I could see Shanklin eventually being a strong side end in the way that Isaiah Foskey was. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but ultimately he is a Viper. He's a Viper right here, right now. But I could see him eventually being an Isaiah Foskey-ish type of player where it's like, you could probably play him at big end if you wanted to, right? I mean, at the end there, like Isaiah Foskey was 265 pounds. He could have played big end if he really felt like it. But regardless, that's the Viper that Notre Dame really wants. You know what I love? Just talking about the staff for a second, Sean. And Christopher Burgess talked about this a lot after he made his commitment. And we'll actually maybe hear from Christopher Burgess at some point in this show. Who knows? But he said the thing that really sold him on Notre Dame was that they made it apparent every time he talked that they needed him, right? It wasn't that they wanted him. They needed him. They wanted him to be the key cog. They wanted him to be the face. They wanted him to be the guy. And I mean, I've even talked to this is a different conversation of a different position, but like Marco Jones in the linebacker in 2025, they already sell into him like, we got a great California linebacker in 2024 named Kingston Viliamoasa. You know what's great? You and him can work together so well. And we need what you do. Like, need is the word that you hear a lot. And I think kids buy into that, man. They buy into that because they know that you value them, right? They value what you could bring to the table. They value every part of your game. Notre Dame's doing that, man. I love it. I really love how much they're making guys like Damian Shanklin feel like they need to be a part of the Notre Dame program, not want to be a part of the Notre Dame program.
Isn't that just an extension of what we hear about Marcus Freeman and who he is as a person and the honesty we hear from the staff, from recruits and recruiting, right? Jeremiah Love, his story, and his dad, Jay Love, and the honesty they got from Dylan McCullough every time. And it's the same thing we hear from other coaches on the recruiting trail from recruits. And that comes down from Marcus Freeman. So when you get that type of honesty with a kid like Chris Burgess Jr., it resonates, and it needs to resonate, right? Because the Chicago kid needs to know, why should I trust you? My aspirations are this. Why should I trust you to develop me as a young man on and off the field? And when you give them truth, kids know. Like, kids know. They're smarter than we think. Kids can tell when you're just, feeding them a bunch of crap, when you're lying, and they
Yes.
can feel it when you're being honest and authentic with them as well and telling them the truth. And that goes a long way when you're communicating with anybody in life and even
Yep.
in recruiting.
There's an authenticity to the Notre Dame staff, isn't there? Because you just mentioned Jeremiah Love, and I know you're hitting on this one, but I mean, we're not going to disclose the full story, but I mean, basically, the Love family tried to trap Dylan McCullough in lying to them. He tried to trap them, and you know what Dylan McCullough didn't do? He didn't lie to them. He was
Mm-hmm.
honest the entire time, and that is what ultimately drove Love to Notre Dame. That was the biggest part. Was that yes, he can see himself there, but ultimately, do I trust the people that are developing me that I need to be around every single day? Can I trust them? And I think that's why Christopher Burgess chose Notre Dame over. I mean, he was high on Ohio State. He was high on Ohio State. He was high on a couple other schools. I know he liked Michigan. I know he liked Bama to a degree. I mean, obviously, it would have taken it would have shook up a little bit after Nick Saban stepped down, right? Like that would have been a little
Mm-hmm.
bit different. But ultimately, Notre Dame won for Christopher Burgess because he trusted them and he made them feel like a need. And I think that it is similar of how they are making a guy like Damian Shanklin feel right now. He feels like he feels like they need him, which is I think a great place to be, man. So he is going to be a really good football player, Damian Shanklin. I think Notre Dame is the front runner right for now. You have to close, but good thing is, Sean, he'll be back on the 20th for Junior Day, which is a great sign that a kid just keeps coming back to school, man. Keeps coming back to school. Keeps coming
Feel free
back.
to commit, Damien. Feel free.
Hey, man, and I'll say this isn't as much about Damian, Sean, but of the list that we have put together already, I'm let me phrase this the best way. Don't be surprised if there's not a couple kids that pop on the 20th. I'm not saying it's going to be Damian Shanklin, but do not be surprised if there's a couple kids that don't pop on the 20th. I think that Notre Dame has put themselves in a great position with several of the players that are going to be on campus very soon here for Junior Day.
I know it's early, but would
Yes.
you put the combination of Burgess Shanklin, if Shanklin does commit, to have those two guys coming off the edge for the next 3 to 4 years? That's
Pretty
going to be tough.
scary, man.
That's going to be tough
Pretty
to beat
scary.
in this
Yeah.
recruiting cycle.
It's going to be scary to, just like tangibly for Notre Dame. Because Sean, I've kind of phrased it in my film room on Christopher Burgess. He's not nearly to his ceiling, man. Like he's nowhere
Mm-mm.
near it, guys.
Mm-mm.
But you watch him move and you watch the frame he has, and you're just like, dude, like if he hits his potential and his upside, that kid could be a superstar. I mean, you mentioned it with Shanklin, but like Christopher Burgess could be a game wrecker as a big end if he hits his
Absolutely.
upside. Like he really could, man. And
Did you,
CJ May,
did
right?
you see
Like,
the picture he took with his new
yes,
high school coach and Marquise Lightfoot?
yes,
You see how thick he was
yes, compared to
in
Lightfoot,
comparison to
right?
Lightfoot?
Yeah. Well, I
I'm
saw
like,
Lightfoot in
okay.
person, man. I'm like, Lightfoot is long as heck, right? Like he's a
Mm-hmm.
long dude, but he's got a lot of room that he needs to put on mass, right? Like he is not
Mm-hmm.
nearly thick enough right now. But Burgess is almost ready to play physically. Again, technical wise, nowhere near. Like there's things that need to develop there, but physically, he can play, man. I mean, I'll take that type of kid every single year and 7 times on Saturdays. Like, give me guys that look like Christopher Burgess. Other guy we want to talk on real quick before we get into an interview here, Jarquez Carter, who's a defensive tackle out of Newberry, Florida. This is an interesting one, Sean. Listed now at 6'2", 287 pounds, gained a bunch of weight this offseason, and it's really good weights. I mean, he played at like 270 as a sophomore. He's like 287 right now coming out of his junior year. This is a young man where there was a lot of momentum early for Notre Dame. Notre Dame got him to come up to campus. It went really well. He's pretty good friends with Davion Dixon, who's already in the class for Notre Dame. Cool. And then there was kind of a break in communication for whatever reason. I actually have not gotten to the bottom of that, folks. I don't know if it's just numbers seemed like maybe they couldn't get Jarquez just because of numbers issues. And I still have my questions of like if he's a guy that they're 100% going to push for. But what I do know, Sean, is we always know that actions speak a whole lot louder than words. You know what the actions are recently over the last few weeks? They're calling him every day, every single day, which tells me maybe they can make those numbers work. Maybe they can get a Jarquez Carter to go along with a Davion Dixon inside. And that might be also because Like, again, in a blanket, a lot of people are including Dominic Kulak on the defensive line recruiting, but I'm telling you guys, that gives them flexibility, man. If they want to try to get one extra defensive lineman, they can leave Kulak as a interior offensive, as a linebacker, a true off-ball kid, a true second-level player. But regardless, Jarquez is talking to Notre Dame every single day. He is trying to come back up for a visit. There's a possibility, this has not been cemented, possibility that he could be here this month. It's possible. It's in the works potentially. And I will say this, Sean, I talked to a different source away from the Notre Dame program, and not with Carter either, but a person that I trust thoroughly. And there is a feeling that Jarquez Carter, Notre Dame might be the top school for Jarquez Carter right now. So if Notre Dame wants him and they push, I think they're going to have a chance at Jarquez Carter, man, who's more of a Davion Dixon's kind of that space eater, physical dude. Jarquez is that twitched up 3 technique who can get after the quarterback a little bit.
Absolutely. Between Jarquez Carter and me, Julian Marks, 2 Florida kids, dude, and I think both of them play basketball. That's what you're talking about. Like those twitchy kids, 3 technique, Tommy Harris types that just can, you talk about game wreckers, they can just wreck
Tommy
everything.
Harris is a good comp, man. I like
that.
Yeah, Tommy Harris is a good comp. I like that.
Chicago Bears fans that might be in the chat, no. Like once he got hurt, everything else went downhill with that Tampa 2 defense. And those are the type of kids that you get that up front can just make a humongous difference in the program and the direction of the program defensively. If you think the defense is good now, if Notre Dame starts getting the Chris Burgesses, the Damian Shanklins, the Jarquez Carters, the Davion Dixons, now you're talking about that defense going to that top 10 level through the air and on the ground. Now you're talking about holding teams to less than 100 yards, less than 80 yards per game on the ground. If Notre Dame can get to that level defensively, man, watch out. Definitely watch out, because you might see a couple of titles coming to South Bend. But look, the kid's film speaks for itself. You talk about the relationship he has with Davion Dixon. I hope they get him. Hey, in recruiting, it's just like high school, man. You like the girl, tell her.
Right.
Tell her. Don't be that guy that sits back and is like, well, I don't know, because you snooze, you're going to lose.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to see an ugly dude with her, and then you're going to be mad. Like, how's she with him? Because he had the courage to tell her, I like you. I'd like to take you out. And the same thing. If you want Jarquez Carter Notre Dame, tell him. Every day. Tell him. Let them know we need you. The same thing you did with Chris Burgess. Because I think in the 24 class, maybe there are a couple of people that didn't end up coming to Notre Dame that we might feel like Notre Dame didn't probably do as much as they should have.
Sure.
With this particular individual. I don't think that same mistake is being made with the 25 class. So that's good to see.
And I think the numbers are going to be very interesting, Sean, because so people came in late, so I kind of led off with like Notre Dame still has contacts with guys like Isaiah Campbell, Matthew Johnson out of California, but there just isn't a ton of traction there. We're talking about kids that are legitimately possible, and also they're I think a lot closer to decisions, which that's going to affect the numbers as well. The numbers, though, is going to be very interesting. 2025 defensive line class, just class in general, not even defense for a second, Sean, because we are told it's going to be a bigger class. Well, first and foremost, it's going to be a bigger class. And also, I believe, just based upon some conversations I've had and Brian's had, and we've kind of collaborated this together, I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame over-recruited a little bit this class. They kind of kept ties with kids, because ultimately, we saw this a little bit at wide receiver recruiting in 2024 when a decommitment happened. Having relationships can really help you down the line, just in case a decommitment does happen. In case a player goes pro early, a couple of extra people hit a transfer portal that you're not expecting. Numbers can change very quickly here. So expect a bigger class. Expect Notre Dame to maybe over-recruit a little bit and keep those relationships in case they have a spot open for them and they can make it work. I think that those are going to be a couple key things to watch. Long story short, Sean, Notre Dame defensive line recruiting is in a tremendous spot, man. And that is, of course, included in Christopher Burgess, who committed last weekend to University of Notre Dame over finalists. Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, and he threw at LSU just to be hilarious. He just threw at LSU there for some reason. I just don't know why he did that. But he chose Notre Dame, Sean. And right afterwards, there was a interview that was put out there. It got a little bit of context to, obviously why he picked Notre Dame, all that type of stuff. Also, guys, a couple days ago, I got a chance to sit down with Christopher Burgess, talk about his recruitment, talk about why Notre Dame, and we want to play for you all that next. So this is a pre-recorded conversation that I personally had a couple days ago with Mr. Christopher Burgess, and I hope you all enjoy it here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Now joining the Irish Breakdown Podcast for the first time as a full-fledged member of the 2025 recruiting class and one of the newest members. I almost said the newest member, but I was like, they just got another commitment from Ethan Long not too long after. Christopher Burgess, who is a star defensive end out of the city of Chicago, state of Illinois, 2025 class, top 100 defensive end in the 2025 class. A huge get, obviously, for Notre Dame. Him being a Chicago kid, just 90 minutes away, him being a big-time recruit, and they got the big commitments during the All-American Bowl, right as the game started there in the beginning. Chris, first and foremost, man, appreciate you for coming on. I guess the most easy question to start this conversation, man, is what's it feel like being Irish officially?
Feels amazing. Feel like I got all the weight off my shoulders. Feels like I'm home.
Well, I mean, literally, man, you are just about home. I mean, we talked about it, right? But it's like you are 90 minutes away. Obviously, the city of Chicago is considered kind of the backyard to Notre Dame football. And I know it was honestly probably a very daunting process for you, with all the different schools coming at you. And I know you developed some great relationships with like Ohio State, Michigan, and some of your other finalists. I guess my main question to really kind of get the conversation started is that moment to be able to be one of the, I think it was only 2025 kids that were at the All-American Bowl and being able to make your early declaration. And like you said, kind of get the process over with a little bit. Just what was that moment like overall? Being down in San Antonio, doing it live, being with your family, like what just relive that moment for me a little bit.
Well, it was like a lot of nerves going on because you got all the attention going towards you. You got a lot of cameras going towards you. Over like 1 million people watching on TV. So like the nerves is like pumping,
Yeah. Well, I would say this, man, is I'm trying to remember back to when I was your age. I would not have been brave enough to do that, man. I mean, you got millions of eyes on you. It's hectic. It's very hectic. So I applaud you first and foremost for even being as charismatic in that moment, but also being able to do that moment. Because at your age, I definitely wouldn't be able to do that. Well, let me ask you this, because I know leading up to the decision again, I mean, you had a great finalist list. I mean, I mentioned Ohio State, I mentioned Michigan, Alabama's on your list, LSU was on your list, a lot of big time programs. I guess kind of a two-parter here is, what was your emotions leading up to that final decision time? And then now just kind of looking back on it, how happy are you with the decision that you ultimately made?
Well, looking back, I'm like super grateful and happy because I wouldn't say it's like a lot of emotion going up to the decision because Coach Freeman told me like just take your emotions out the pitch and just choose where your heart want to go. So that's what I did. I just took my emotions out, took my feelings out, and just chose where my heart was going.
And obviously it's a big pickup for Notre Dame in the 2025 class, which I'm going to ask you about in a little bit because Notre Dame is off to a tremendous start in 2025. I think it's going to be the best recruiting class so far under Coach Freeman. I wanted to ask because, I mean, so you are for people that don't know your background a little bit, you were a big-time basketball player as well, a little bit of a younger age, right? You were obviously a big-time football player. You're also a student athlete and obviously a student good enough to even qualify to go to the University of Notre Dame. So I know academics are also very important to you. Talk to me about the recruiting process in general, outside of picking Notre Dame, talking to this coach, that coach. How were you able to handle just kind of the hecticness of it, man? Because I know it can be really chaotic this time of year, especially.
Yeah, well, I handle it like one coach at a time. Like it's like a lot of patience going through this because everybody want to talk to you. Everybody want to get your attention. Everybody wants your commitment. It's like you just got to be patient with it and just enjoy the process,
Absolutely. Well, and I think another great question would be, and I probably should have led this off, but because I asked you, you being Irish and being able to make that decision and just how excited you are for that. But ultimately, Chris, like, why was it your decision? I mean, you had a lot of great suitors, a lot of big time programs. Why Notre Dame in the end?
Because, like I said, they in my backyard, they're an hour away. And then they were like the number one school that had the best relationship with my parents. And at the same time, they invested a lot into me. Like, they hosted workouts with me, and they did a lot of stuff for me. And it was like, them was the ones, I had to choose them.
Well, I one thing that you were super consistent on anytime I was DMing with you and just kind of talking with you a little bit was you mentioned every single time just about that Notre Dame had always made you a priority and made you the centerpiece of this, right? Like you are the guy that they need. I guess how important was just kind of those coaches' relationships, whether it is Coach Freeman, Coach Wash, even Chad Bowden, obviously on the recruiting side. How important were those relationships, I guess, to this decision?
It was like very important. Like I wanted to know the coaches personally. Like for the school I'm gonna pick, I just wanted to know every single coach who I was gonna be around, who was gonna coach me, just like etc. So I just wanted to know, like, if I choose a school, are they gonna take care of me in the long run? So that was like my most important thing.
Was it important at all? And I'm very curious about this because Marcus Freeman, obviously, before he was the head coach of Notre Dame, he had been developing a reputation as one of the great defensive minds in all of college football. I mean, you talk about what he was doing as a defensive coordinator even before he got to Notre Dame. Was that important at all as far as being a part of being under a staff that has such a great reputation to develop defensive players? Because I know ultimately, I'm sure you have high aspirations to eventually get to that highest level.
Yeah, I wanted to play. I don't know what defensive player don't want to play for a coach that has a good resume, So like, I wanted to play for a coach. I want to play for a coach that has a perfect or a good defensive resume. And he's known for having a good defense, whatever team he go to. So that's like played a big factor in me picking Notre Dame.
So the rest of the 2025 class, I know I'm going to get a little more specific here, but I would love to hear just kind of some of your early relationships. I know every player I talk to, and I talk to Deuce Knight pretty frequently, but they always talk about like that guy's been in their ear constantly about coming to Notre Dame. Who are a couple of guys that I maybe were just kind of reaching out to you, and how is your relationships overall with the other 2025 commits in the class for Notre Dame?
Well, it was mostly Deuce Knight. Like, he was the one that was recruiting me all the time. I'm sure he recruited other players, but like he was recruiting me hard, telling me like Notre Dame the place to be. You got to come to Notre Dame. It's home. Like, I was like, if a player is trying to recruit another player that much, I'm like, they must be doing something right. So that's really the reason I picked Notre Dame as well.
I don't know how much you've been able to dig into the rest of the 2025 class, but I mean, because Deuce is obviously going to get a lot of the conversation, but the defensive start that you guys are off to in 2025, guys like yourself, obviously, Ivan Taylor, Creed Thomas, Dominic Kulak, Davion Dixon, like there is so much great defensive talent overall in 2025. Just your early impressions on, I guess, just how good this class could potentially be. I mean, like I said, I think that this could be Coach Freeman's best recruiting class during his time at Notre Dame so far, but just your early impressions of how good you think this class can be.
I think this class can be amazing. Well, in the long run, if we all like playing for Notre Dame in the future, this is going to be a great team, because we already great right now. We got like the number one recruiting class, number one defensive recruiting class. So like, I believe this defense in this 2025 class is going to be amazing in the long run.
One guy that's been killing it on the recruiting trail is, I know we talked a lot about Marcus Freeman, but Al Washington's obviously been doing a great job. I mean, he pulled in a great 2024 class, 2025 off to a hot start. What can you tell us about Al Washington? I know that he's been really making some waves on the recruiting trail. Obviously, they just had a really nice year on the defensive line in 2023. What can you just tell us about Coach Wash?
I think Coach Wash is like an amazing coach. Like I said this like a year ago that like he was my favorite defensive line coach that's like recruiting me right now. And like, I just wanted to spoke that into existence, So like, he's developing these players like Isaiah Folsky and Javante John Baptiste. Like he's developing these players at the D line. So like, that's who I want to play for.
I'm curious about your projection as a player a little bit because Chris, I think what impresses me so much about you is that you're a guy that I look at and say, I could do so many different things with them. Like obviously base 4-3 ends, but I think you can stand up a little bit at times. I think that you can reduce down and maybe play like a little bit of a 3 and obviously passing situations. How would you ultimately describe yourself as a defensive lineman, and how much is your versatility, I guess, to be able to move up and down the line of scrimmage? How important is that for you?
It's very important. Like I think myself being like an all around defensive line player. Like I can play any position on D line. The last 2 years I was playing 3 technique, like just D tackle at 230.
Yeah.
And for my main position is at the edge rusher. So like I believe I could play any position on D line.
I know, man. I was watching a little bit of Simeon this past year, and yeah, were you guys running a 3-4? Is that the defense you guys were running? Because I know I was watching you. I was like, they're playing a lot of 3 down right now, man. Like he's doing his work. I mean, you were playing like a 5-3, 4-4-I. It seemed at times, man. It's interesting, but I know that you're home obviously on the next level from its sounds and early conversations. Obviously, is that strong side defensive end to be able to be that guy that can really develop. It seems.
Yeah, I feel like my development at defensive line gonna like increase a lot playing for Notre Dame because, like I said, I've been playing the strong side, the 3 technique for a long time now. So I believe like if I play for Notre Dame, it's gonna like increase, go up. My stock gonna rise playing like their defense. You know, they have like an NFL style defense, so I believe I'm gonna strive in that.
And I actually have, it's not out in the universe yet, but I was just working on a film breakdown of you because, again, I thought that you put a lot of great stuff on film as a junior. Can you talk to me maybe just about your physical development or your development as a player over the last couple of years? Because like I said, early on, I know you were a little bit more of a basketball guy as far as that was kind of like something that you were playing a whole lot of. Talk to me a little bit about just kind of your development as a player, I guess, over the last couple of years.
Well, my development as a player was like, it's like increasing a lot. Like each day I'm working on something new. Each year I'm doing better at something. Like it's just like I'm staying consistent with it. Like I'm staying consistent with developing. Like my stock is rising just because I'm training every day. So like I'm going to develop at something. Like my legs, explosiveness, my hips, core. Like I'm going to develop at something.
Well, and Chris, my last question for you is because obviously a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to listen to this, and I know they're super excited for a lot of different reasons I already talked about. You're a big time defensive end, a very important position just in general in the sport of football. You're obviously a guy that's right in Notre Dame's backyard. I know there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that just generally live in Chicago because it's so close by to obviously South Bend, Indiana. But my last question is just overall for the Notre Dame fans that are listening to this interview, I guess just a little glimpse into you, like as far as what should they expect from you as far as player wise, as a person, I guess overall, what do you feel like you bring to the Notre Dame program?
Well, they should expect a great player coming out of Notre Dame, a first round coming out of Notre Dame. So like they should expect a lot out of me. They should expect like a natty coming in the future.
I love that, man. That's a great way to end this podcast. Again, Irish Breakdown Podcast, Chris Burgess, star defensive end, 2025 class out of the city of Chicago. Chris, I really appreciate you taking some time, man. I know it's been hustle and bustle since being down in San Antonio, making the commitment, getting back home and, coming on with me, man. So I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
I appreciate you for having me.
There you have it, folks. That's Mr. Christopher Burgess, newest defensive line commit in the 2025 class. So University of Notre Dame. Sean, I know it was a very good conversation with Chris. I will say this. I have interviewed a lot of people over the last 8 years, I guess, is as long as I've been doing interviews. And that is mostly NFL draft prospects. But obviously now that is recruits, coaches, a whole lot of different people. Out of the players I've interviewed, Sean, both NFL draft centric, high school centric, he is arguably the most confident player that I've ever interviewed. I think to put it that way. I mean, his last answer, Sean, about national championships and first round draft picks, I was like, dang, man, he believes it, man. He believes it.
Ryan, that's just a little South Side swag. That's all it is.
Okay.
Little Chicago South Side swag. That's all it is.
I dig it, man. Hey, I respect it, man. I respect it very much because Notre Dame needs more of that kind of, that kind of urgency to being great. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they really do need that. So I respect it, man. That just last answer, I was like, yes, sir. Love that. I love that.
you know how you lock into cultures at certain schools, in recruiting, or certain schools that have a winning culture when you're evaluating for the draft. And certain GMs love getting players, from winning cultures, and they're coached by Nick Saban and guys like that. And you talk about Simeon, the football program is vastly underrated because the basketball program takes center stage so many times. That's what people hear about, all the players they put out as far as hoops. But the football team puts out a lot of D1 prospects to go to Power 5 schools on an annual basis. A long legacy of great coaches, and Chris Burgess comes right behind that, with his previous coach, Dante Colbert, being one of those guys that put in a decade of nothing but winners at Simeon. So when he actually starts to hone in on technique and because the athletic ability is off the charts.
Ceiling is the roof for Christopher Burgess. He can be as good as he wants to be and as good as Notre Dame allows him to be. He could be a tremendous football player, there's no doubt. So that's defensive line recruiting, folks. That's Christopher Burgess. We're going to get to linebacker recruiting next. We have a long way to go on this show. So before we do, if you could just hit that like button for us, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, notification bell on the bottom of the screen if you're listening to us on YouTube. 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms. And go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. A lot of recruiting intel. We'll have some team intel this offseason as well. We'll have updates on the 2025 recruits who are going to be on campus for Junior Day on the 20th. But we'll get to the next side here, talking linebackers here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Sean, when we talk Notre Dame linebacker recruiting, it's a little bit of a different conversation because tangibly, when we're talking about defensive line, it's pretty easy to talk about because we have 4 guys already committed in the class, 5 if you count a hybrid player in Dominic Kulak. Linebacker class is not nearly as not nearly solidified. It's not anywhere even tangibly understood right now because there's a lot of great names, but there's not a lot of, there's no commitments in the class currently. We are still working on who's going to be the first, who's going to pop, what's the class ultimately going to look like. And that makes it fun, man. That makes it really fun to me because there's a lot of different combinations that we could see, because we could include Dominic Kulak in this conversation. For the sake of conversation, I'll say Dominic Kulak is the only linebacker in the class. I'll actually take my back, even though I believe Notre Dame views it as this, because I know people are going to ask about numbers a lot. They view the defensive linemen in the class, they view the linebackers, and then Dominic Kulak kind of has a separate bucket. He's almost like an athlete, right? Like they kind of just put him in his own little hybrid category. But ultimately, there's going to be a spot probably for 3 linebackers in this class, maybe 4 if the right 4 come. And we'll talk about one player specifically, Sean, because there could be a little bit of versatility that one brings to the table that could allow Notre Dame to be able to maneuver some things a little bit from a linebacker perspective. Again, guys, it's going to be a big class, man. It's going to be a big class. Let's talk, Sean, about some of these names. And these are in no particular order, because I would say this, guys, there's a group of probably like 3 or 4 linebackers that I think Notre Dame's in a pretty solid early spot right now. Yeah. But it's not like a ton of separation as far as as it's in a situation where Notre Dame is pretty high on their list, probably in their top 2 to 3, whatever it is, whatever their highest group is. But I don't know if I would say anybody is like foregone conclusion outside of one that Notre Dame is the school to beat. Like ultimately, they're going to battle for some of these kids. Let's start out the conversation though, Sean, about the player that is on campus as we speak. And that's Josiah Kia, who we had on this podcast, Hawaii linebacker 2025. For people that missed the news, Kahanu Kia, which is his older brother that was in the 2022 class, he is back from his LDS mission, and he's back this weekend. And they kind of, the Kia family timed this up, Sean. They're like, all right, Kanu's going to go back then. We're also going to get Josiah out for a visit then and be able to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone a little bit, help him move in, help him get settled. But also Josiah gets the whole, the recruiting experience. So, Sean, he's a very interesting football player. We had him on the podcast. Obviously, anybody that remembers that interview, he fits Notre Dame to a T from a spirituality perspective, from a young man perspective, from just a student athlete perspective, like he fits it, right? He also is a very interesting player because I think he's a player that could add a little bit of position versatility as a linebacker, in the sense that he is listed at 6'2", 6'3", 210 pounds. He has played, if you watch his high school in Hawaii, he plays in the middle of the defense. He plays outside at times. He plays on the edge a little bit. He plays all over the place, Josiah Kia, everywhere. And I believe that he's a guy that could be looked at as a rover. He could be looked at as a will. Like, he is a very versatile move piece. And I will say this, Sean, because I know that people, one, there's not a ton of film on Josiah Kia. So this is kind of one that we just have to kind of trust the evaluation a little bit. I mean, there's some film out there, but I will say this, Sean, and we'll talk about him as a player and talking about him as a fit. Notre Dame loves Josiah Kia. They really like the football player. If Josiah Kia wanted to commit to Notre Dame this weekend, I 100% believe that Notre Dame would take his commitment. 100%. And this is not a throw-in, folks. This is not his brother goes to Notre Dame, he's going to Notre Dame. He has offers from Texas, Sean. He has offers from USC. He has offers from Oregon. Like, he has a pretty good offer list, man, considering he's a Hawaii kid. It's out, way out there.
Mm-hmm.
Good player, man. The Notre Dame looks a lot, obviously.
Great kid. The interview, if you missed it, please check it out, man. It's one of the best interviews. Solid kid, especially with the winter. You like the background with the palm trees and everything and make you think that you're in Hawaii. But I'm happy that they see, this staff, what we see when we watch film, right? This first thing you think, Hawaii competition. This kid can play. He can flat out play the position. And look, it's not a negative that his brother's at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Oh, no,
it's
not
not
at all.
It's not the only thing. I mean, I'll take the position of having family already here, being able to tell him what it's all about and what it's like and what the coaching staff is like, because that helps in recruiting. But like you said, USC's after him, Texas after him. And he talked about in the interview with us, he has good relationships with multiple coaching staffs along with Notre Dame. So we'll see how it turns out. But I think Notre Dame has a good shot. I think they do have a good shot to land this kid.
Yeah, and we're not going to spend too much time, guys. So, yes, Josiah Kia is on campus now. We'll be on campus for this weekend. We'll have an updated irishbreakdown.com. We'll have an interview with him. We'll get you guys settled on how the visit went ultimately. But, yeah, Sean, I think it's a perfect way to say Notre Dame has a very good chance. Again, there are other good programs out there. USC, Texas, Oregon. There's some guys that are looking at Josiah, but I think Notre Dame has a very good chance at landing Josiah Kia. And could it happen this weekend? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I genuinely don't know if he's ready to pop this weekend, but ultimately, I wouldn't be shocked if that happened either. So, Sean, I don't want to spend too much time. I just kind of want to throw out a couple names that Notre Dame is certainly recruiting or not recruiting, but it's just not enough like feeling of that it's trending in a great direction. So we'll kind of put it like that. One is Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, which pains me because he's the younger brother of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who is a star at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
He plays on an IMG. He told me on an interview about 2 months ago, I guess at this point, his top four was Miami, Florida State, Florida, and Notre Dame. Yeah. And the minute he told me that, Sean, at first I was like, oh, that's good. Notre Dame is keeping up with the Florida schools. And then I was like, that actually means that that's probably not a great sign. That it's all Florida and then it's Notre Dame. And he's never been to Notre Dame either. He's never visited, despite his brother being a All-American linebacker at Notre Dame. So I just don't think that one's incredibly likely. I also know that Carlton Smith down in Maryland in St. Francis Academy included Notre Dame in like a top 5 or top 6 a couple weeks ago. Just don't think there's anything there right now. We'll see where things tend to trend. Also, Brett Clatterball, who's a who's a linebacker out of Virginia. He included Notre Dame. He included Notre Dame in a top school list. Sean, I'm just not totally sold based upon my conversation that like Notre Dame is pushing there, to be honest with y'all. So
well, that's the current landscape of recruiting on the recruit side, right? Like elevate myself and elevate the interest in my recruiting by adding certain brands. If you need to see why the Notre Dame brand still resides at the top of college football, simply look at recruiting. Every kid wants to find a way to put Notre Dame in their top 5, top 7, top 10, whatever.
Yes. Yep. And I obviously I never want to accuse somebody of that, but like I just haven't gotten a vibe that like Notre Dame is certainly talking to Brett Clatterball. I just don't know if I would say it's pushing right now, and anything could change, but that's just kind of my vibe there. Notre Dame is still recruiting, so there's hope. Nasir Wyatt out of Mater Dei in California. Again, like these are long shots, guys, these next couple players, but Notre Dame is still recruiting them. So they're recruiting him. They're also recruiting Gavin Nix, who's down at IMG Academy. They're also recruiting Noah McHale. And Noah McHale, actually, it's a little more serious than like just keeping in touch. Like they are actively trying to get Noah McHale back to Notre Dame. And I think Noah McHale has legitimate interest of getting back to Notre Dame. It's just, he hasn't been at Notre Dame in a long time now, Sean, and he's taking other visits and he just hasn't been there a long time. If Noah McHale gets back anytime soon, then I start to feel better about Notre Dame's standing. But, it's just one of those things where you just want to see him set up that return visit, man. Just set it.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to come for the USC game last season. He ended up not making the trip. So we'll see. I think that Notre Dame has a shot there. It's just about, they need to get him back to campus, though. They need to get him back to campus for sure.
Getting back to campus is so important in recruiting, man.
Yep. Sure
and the fact that this staff gets these recruits to come to South Bend during inclement weather. Look, when you see the list of kids that show up for this junior day, the weather is not about to be perfect.
Yep.
That shows you the excitement around Marcus Freeman, this program, and this staff. And they have yet to win at the top level yet.
Absolutely.
So, man, be very aware that if Notre Dame can find a way to actually set up a winning season in 24, man.
Yep, it's possible.
25 class could be epic.
Yes, it could. It could really burst in a very quick way. So let's talk about 3 players, Sean, that I think Notre Dame is in a good position or a very good position potentially in all 3 situations. One is Christian Jones, who's out of Omaha West Side. Why does Omaha West Side sound familiar? It's because Notre Dame just got Teddy Rizak in the 2024 class, linebacker. They just got preferred walk-on quarterback, his brother, Anthony Rizak, in the 2024 recruiting class as well. They are recruiting Christian Jones very hard, Sean. I had an update on Christian Jones maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, 6'3", 215 pounds, out of the state of Nebraska. Very interesting one. So he's visited Notre Dame before already. He is planning another trip this winter into spring. There has not been a date that has been finalized. I'm not sure if I actually don't think he's going to make it on the 20th, but I do imagine that Christian Jones is going to get back to Notre Dame sometimes pretty soon in the near future over the next couple months. Obviously, Sean, kid's a stud, top 100 ranked player by multiple platforms. Kid plays wide receiver for Omaha West Side. He plays overhang on defense. He plays inside linebacker. Kid is physical, explosive, and just a really good overall athlete. I really like Christian Jones a lot. And also the fact that the Rizaks are his best friends doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt your cause at all.
Yeah. Yo, the Joneses in the 25 class, particularly at this position, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. And I'm sure it's going to probably come down to definitely Nebraska with the strides they're trying to make in state and changing the program. Michigan, Big Ten schools, and then you're going to have some SEC schools. It's going to be a battle for Notre Dame, right? But once again, when a kid continues to come back to your campus and wants to come back to your campus, that's a good sign that the coaching staff is doing the right thing. So the Rizak combination with them being tight, Xavier Watts being another kid from Nebraska, for him to see, prospering at Notre Dame, those are good signs when it comes to Christian Jones.
I really think so, man. And he's a player that obviously, if the Rizaks weren't in the 2024 class, Notre Dame would still be pushing for him hard because he's a tremendous player, top 100 player in the 2025 class. Could play well, could also maybe grow into a Mike down the line as well. Like he's a very gifted inside linebacker.
Yeah.
And I will say this about Christian Jones too, Sean. I think he's going to stay in the Midwest somewhere. I would be shocked if he left for the SEC or anywhere else. Nebraska is the biggest threat. There's no doubt. I think there's a little bit of that Carter Nelson thing where it's like he's an in-state kid in Nebraska,
Mhm.
grew up a Nebraska fan, like that type of thing. But I mean, that was also true of the Rezacs, for instance, right? That was
Yeah.
also true of Xavier Watts, for instance, and he ends up going to Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame probably has the best chance at pulling him out of Nebraska right now. But ultimately, Christian Jones still has a long way to go in the recruiting process. Like he's not ready to make a decision. He's going to take some visits. I think he already set up a couple for this offseason already. I expect Notre Dame to be in like the next wave of visits that he's going to set up. He kind of, during the season, he was like, I'm concentrating on winning a state championship. And they went 15-0, won a state championship. Now that the season is over and he just kind of has his eye forward, I think that he's going to be taking several visits this offseason as well. So he's a good one there to make sure that you guys keep a close eye on. Another guy, Sean, a player that you've heard us talking nauseum on this show, folks, nauseum. Anthony Sacca, linebacker, St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, son of Tony Sacca.
Former quarterback.
Former Penn State quarterback that played with Al Golden at Penn State. That's obviously that's the relationship right there. And there was actually, Sean, I know that there was a couple of months ago where someone said this, and I thought it was actually true at the time, was if Al Golden leaves for the NFL, let's say, right? If he leaves for the NFL, then does that hurt your chances with Anthony Sacca? And I think the answer was yes. I think that it would have. But as of now, it appears more than likely that Al Golden will be back for Notre Dame, which tells you that relationship is intact. That matters so much. So there are schools, I think a couple other schools to know is Penn State, obviously, because his dad went there. Like these guys has the allegiance family-wise. I think Ohio State is also a contender for Anthony Sacca. I still think he stays in the Northeast or into the Midwest. I still think he stays in this region. And I think Notre Dame's in his top group. I would say they're probably a top 2 to 3 school for Anthony Sacca right now. You have to get him back to campus, which, again, hasn't been solidified, but it could happen sometime soon. Notre Dame has to get him back to campus, and they have to continue to really stress that relationship and how he's viewed in the defense, because this is a kid that could play Rover. He could play Will. I think he even grow into a Mike, Sean. There's a possibility that this kid could play all. Do you hear me? No? Yes?
I you froze on my screen for a second, so I was waiting. So I didn't want to.
What was the last thing you heard? What was the last thing you heard?
No, you were stressing the relationship, and they have to continue to stress the relationship. He can play all over the place. And the only thing I would add to that, is the fact that, in stressing that relationship, it's going to be very important that the development of these young linebackers also be a visual to how he can see himself in the Al Golden defense. Because Al Golden seems to have a way, with Bodie Cahoon, the communication with him that got Bodie Cahoon locked in, like, okay, Notre Dame's a place. Hopefully the relationship with his dad, communication with Anthony's, and then, because Penn State's going to be difficult, right? His dad played there. He grew up on, probably going to games. And then on top of that, Pennsylvania guy, on top of that, heck, they got a history of producing linebackers to the NFL. Like, it is what it is. I mean, that's the case, right? Marcus Freeman, we feel like he has the upper hand over James Franklin, in our opinion, as far as a head coach and where the Notre Dame program is headed. And, the coaching staff is going to have to, put on the big boy gloves and britches and dig deep on this one, because he's a fantastic player.
And I will say this, Sean, is if they do get him, you have to give majority of the credit. I mean, of course, Marcus Freeman always gets credit. Chad Bowden always gets credit, but you got to get a lot of credit to Al Gold, man, because that relationship would be why they sealed that deal. Like, that would be a huge, huge pickup. And Notre Dame has a chance, folks. Again, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, I would say, are probably the top 3. And I would say the top 2 I said there, Notre Dame and Penn State, are probably the top 2. What the order exactly is right now, it's up for debates. Maybe Penn State. I don't know. But regardless, those are the schools right now for Anthony Sacca, and Notre Dame needs to continue to push hard for him because he is a stud of a player. Last player we want to hit on, Sean, and then we'll get into an interview. And then again, guys, we're going to do mailbag at the end. So throw your mailbag questions into the chat at any point. Last guy, Sean, a guy that I am pumped up about, man. Marco Jones, linebacker, state of California. listed on one recruiting platform at 6'4", 215 pounds. I have been told recently that Marco Jones is closer to 6'5" right now and 230 pounds. So he's had a little bit of a physical transformation this offseason. There was some interest in Marco Jones last offseason, Sean, and then they were lucky enough to get him to come visit. Because I think as soon as he visited, he was kind of like, huh, that's interesting. And he started to really pick up interest in Notre Dame. And since then, I would say Notre Dame has been a top school for Marco Jones. Now they're going to be competing against Oregon. They're going to be competing against, he actually mentioned Maryland, which is kind of a weird one, but there's going to be a couple other West Coast schools that are going to be high on Marco Jones's list.
Of
I think
course.
Notre Dame is right in the thick of it, Sean, for Marco Jones, man. Right in the thick.
Look, man, Texas, California, and I remember we debated, like, remember this? We debated, myself, you, and Brian, which states rank the states in importance. And I've always said, yo, California has always been important to Notre Dame. It's always been important to Notre Dame. You go get KVA. If you can back up KVA with Arco, yeah. Because I think a lot of people think Florida is resurging after kind of leveling off a little bit. Texas took a step up for a lot of people. You start to see states like Arizona and Nevada take steps up. The Midwest powers of Ohio and Pennsylvania have always been what they've been. But the state of California and the relationship that Notre Dame has to it, one of the biggest alumni base out there, high schools, the Catholic high school scene, Notre Dame's always been locked in. Yeah, I can definitely agree with you, man. Notre Dame has a really good shot. This is like, man, you know what, Brian? This is like, okay, we got 6 guys. Just throw their cards up in the air, and whichever cards land in the Notre Dame circle, we'll take them. Like,
Seriously.
We'll take them.
Yeah, I mean, this top group that I'm talking about, Sean, like literally, if you get 3 out of 5 or whatever, you're good to go, man. Like you're good to go. If you get a Josiah Kia with a Christian Jones and a Marco Jones, like run it to the bank, man. If you get an Anthony Sacca, Josiah Kia, and a Marco Jones, run it to the bank. If you get a Christian Jones, Anthony Sacca, Josiah Kia, like dude, run it to the bank. That is a fantastic haul potentially. Marco's a very interesting player, Sean, because although he is a taller linebacker, I watch him on film and I say it's an inside linebacker to me, man. Like he's a linebacker. Could he play on the edge? I mean, he's even talked about it a little bit as far as like he thinks that his body could eventually be full-time edge. Eventually, we'll see. But even as a bigger linebacker, if he's 6'4.5", 245 pounds in a year or two, dog, like we're good, man. Like keep playing inside linebacker because you can blitz from multiple spots. I can work you off the edge. He was the guy that I was hinting at the beginning of this of if you get Marco Jones, I think that you could add even another linebacker and try to get to 4 because he could be an edge eventually. Who knows? Like he could eventually be that type of dude. So Marco Jones, fantastic player. Wanted to end him off here because you know what, folks? You know what? Marco Jones joined me for an interview a few days ago. Actually, when I was down at the All-American Bowl after one practice, Marco Jones, he agreed to come on the podcast. So to end the linebacker conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about it. If anybody has any questions about it more during the mailbag, we can do that. But I want to introduce you all to Mr. Marco Jones and give you guys a little bit of insight into his recruitment, his relationship with Notre Dame, and where his game is heading. This is Marco Jones. Welcome back, everyone, to the Irish Breakdown podcast. Got a little bit of a recruiting extra for you all, for anybody that's been following along on the podcast. I'm down in San Antonio, obviously, for the All-American Bowl, the 2024 version. I have with me, because recruiting never stops and we're already looking ahead, the 2024 class for Notre Dame is already signed, sealed, and delivered. 15 guys are set to enroll on campus in January, actually. So there's a lot of guys that are already going to be in South Bend very soon here. So we're kind of looking ahead already. 2025, Notre Dame already has 11 commits in the 2025 class. And I wanted to bring on a player that I consider a priority player for Notre Dame in 2025. That is Marco Jones out of San Ramon Valley out there in Danville, California. Crazy profile. He's listed anywhere between 6'4", 6'5", 215 pounds. You pop on the film. This is a young man that is sideline to sideline, over 100 tackles as a junior this past year. And I think he's one of, I think I'm going to invite Marco in a second, but like 247 Sports has him as a top 100 player. I don't think there's 30 players that I've seen that I would say are better than Marco Jones in the 2025 class. So Marco, welcome you to the show, man. Thank you again so much right after Christmas, right after New Year's for joining the show, man. I really do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me on. It means a lot. I've watched a couple episodes, so, it's a real honor.
Oh, man, no, absolutely. And we're honored to have you on here. I was telling you before we started, Marco, like I was a former linebacker myself, so I watch your film and I geek out a little bit, your ability to play sideline to sideline and be a true inside linebacker, but also, you can do a little bit of everything, man. That's why I really like your film a lot. I could use you on the line of scrimmage and some, under fronts. I can use you off ball. I can play at Mike, Will. You can play Sam. Like a lot of great things, obviously, that you bring to the table, which I'm excited to get into. I think a great place to start, though, is I loved your sophomore film that I saw, right, when Notre Dame had originally offered you. And then I saw the final product of the junior film. And to be very honest with you, and not to pump up your ego if you have one, I don't even know if you do or not, but it was incredible, man. Really, I thought you took a huge step as a junior. So just talk to me a little bit about the junior seasons, as far as, did you meet all the goals, your expectations, just your growth as a football player as a junior, if it makes sense?
I feel like, it kind of just starts off with my team first. We went to state last year and lost, right? So, our whole goal was to go back and win it this year, which unfortunately we couldn't do. We came up a little bit short. So, definitely didn't want to end that way. But, I give a big thanks kind of to my teammates a lot of the time. Just, they help me out, whether it's in practice or in games, scout team, play starters, no matter what. So, that definitely, I feel like, attributes to some of my success on the field. But I think personally, my season went pretty well. I was pretty happy with my season, but definitely not satisfied because, like Kobe said, the job's not done. So job's not finished. So, and I kind of just got to try and keep that mindset for, as long as I'm playing the game, just to, be the most successful linebacker I can possibly be.
I guess flash forwarding a little bit, Marco, just kind of based upon what you did as a junior now into the offseason a little bit. I'm going to ask more about, just kind of what the process has been recent for you as far as like what you've been up to. But are there a couple things that just kind of based upon what you did as a junior that you are excited to try to improve in your game? Obviously physical development. I know you're going to continue to fill out your frame and get bigger, faster, stronger. But are there like maybe a technical thing or two that you're really kind of focused on to try to take your game to an even higher level?
Yeah, I'm definitely working a lot on the edge in the off season. Actually, right now I'm down in LA with Cali Power, my 5-on-5 team, getting to work in. So, that's definitely one thing because, I know I'm still getting bigger. Like right now I'm actually weighing 230. So, wow. I'm getting a little bit bigger and, and we kind of saw that coming for the most part. And, whether you're recruiting me at inside linebacker or off the edge, definitely doesn't hurt to get extra work in, and the edge is probably looking to be my future. So, I definitely want to. I want to get better at that. Just perfect the little things, handwork, hip movement, all that stuff.
I love it, man. And so, obviously, I'm sure it's been a busy last few weeks. We're right off of Christmas, right off of New Year's, obviously, and the season wrapped up a few weeks ago as well. What have you just been up to, I guess, since the season ended? And, just kind of, are you playing other sports? You just working out? I know you said you're down in LA, obviously getting the work in, but what has just kind of been the latest as far as what you've been doing?
For me, obviously, so I play baseball as well. So, been doing that a good amount, starting that back up. I actually go to Arizona next weekend, I believe, for a tournament. So, getting ready for that as well. But football wise, I'm in the gym every day, working out, especially because break too. So, we don't have school. And I'm on the track running as well. I have a guy who helps with my speed stuff. and you can never be too fast. So definitely, I'm on the track probably 4 or 5 times a week almost, just getting that work in.
It's funny. I was talking to someone yesterday because I'm down here with a lot of, recruiting analysts from different sites and everything. And I was telling them that, I had an interview with you today and I thought that you were a fantastic player. And they were like, have you seen him play baseball, by the way? Because apparently you are a pretty dang good baseball player from what I hear as well.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. Yes, sir.
Love it, man. So let me ask you, as far as kind of just moving forward here, I know during the season, obviously guys take, the game visits and be able to get out to some schools and whatnot. What is that looking like for you as far as like recruiting visits you have set up? Or are there some schools that you're kind of looking forward to see over the next couple months?
I mean, I haven't had anything planned out yet. But we're trying to figure some stuff out. Me and my family, but nothing set in stone yet. But hopefully we can get out to a few schools. Definitely back to Notre Dame. That would be great.
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, like you said, you're training every day. You're playing baseball. We're coming off of the holidays. Obviously, you're focused on your team and getting better each and every day. And then you throw in the being a student, and then obviously the recruiting side of things. My overall question for you, Marco, was just how are you handling the recruiting process, and how are you, I guess, balancing everything? Because it can be hectic, obviously. I'm sure.
Definitely. I think for me, kind of like what works is just cut out all of the extra outside noise, right? I mean, I'm a homebody. I stay home a lot, and I keep a pretty small circle, so that definitely helps. I think that kind of helps me the most, just because a lot of days now, especially with all the NIL and all the new stuff that's kind of arising, there's a lot of people that are coming out the woodworks and want to be your best friend, and they don't have your best interest in mind. I think that's definitely how. I mean, it's definitely because of my parents and the people around me. I mean, no kid would really know what to do, to be honest, to keep it all balanced if it wasn't for the people around them. So, I definitely, give that up to them.
Well, I think that's a great point because, I mean, I know the recruiting world's a little bit different than like when your dad was going through it, right? But it has to be a big bonus, I would think, and I'm sure mom has been great in this capacity as well. But your dad has the perspective, obviously, of being a college football player, right? Kind of going through that process a little bit. I guess the parents, I would assume, have kind of been just a massive help to you. I would think.
100%. My dad played college football. My mom rode. My mom rode crew in college as well. So they've both been, they both played college sports and kind of been through a process similar to this. So I mean, they both definitely help, and them collectively is a big help to me. So
absolutely. Well, and I know you already mentioned it, but hopefully getting back to Notre Dame and being able to see the campus. I know you got there obviously a few months ago. Let me just ask, kind of overall, how has everything been with Notre Dame recently? I know obviously you guys are able to text and call, a lot more than when you were, just a few months ago. How has everything been developing with the staff overall and just, the vibes over there, I guess?
Everything's been, really good. I mean, I love the staff. They're all, outside of football, just talking to them, I can have a conversation with them just about anything outside of football. And I think that's super important because, football is very important to me and to them as well. But it doesn't last forever, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, recruiting's going super well with them. I mean, they reach out a good amount, and I get to stay in touch. And they're in Indiana, I'm in California, so it's always good to hear from my Notre Dame coaches.
Absolutely. And also I would love to hear, because you already talked about it a little bit. You are a very unique defensive player in the sense of you can play multiple linebacker spots. Your body might be developing on the edge, in a more full-time basis. What is kind of Notre Dame's pitch been to you? I mean, that could be from two parts here, Marco, is like, what is their pitch to you as far as why Notre Dame? And then what's their pitch as far as where they could potentially see you in their defense as well?
Yeah. I mean, when I was there, they kind of just telling me, they want me to be a key player in the defense, right? I know they're getting a big linebacker commit in the 24 class. So they were kind of telling me, if it all worked out and I end up going to Notre Dame, they would want to build the class around us too, around the defense around us too. And that would be great. Him in the middle, me coming off the edge or outside, moving around the middle, kind of be like a hybrid linebacker type position.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it would, and he's a California guy as well. You're obviously talking about Kingston Viliamalasa. So Notre Dame's done a pretty good job of California over the last couple of years, which has been really nice to see. I'm curious, and I didn't mention this about kind of wanting to talk about this, but Notre Dame has had success in California in the past. But I'm curious, Marco, before you had even heard from Notre Dame, right? The first time, them offering you all that type of stuff. What was kind of your perception of them early, I guess? Did you know much about them? Did you have a high opinion of them? Like, what was the opinion about Notre Dame before you even, heard from them for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, they're a prestigious football school, right? I mean, you have movies about them, you have shows, you have documentaries, right? Like, I've never been in Indiana before I, was at Notre Dame, never even really been close,
Right.
like any surrounding states. So it was all just kind of cool because everything I heard about Notre Dame was true. So, I mean, it was only good things on the movies and the shows, and sometimes that's hard to believe. You could be like, wow, like that doesn't seem very realistic. But me, my mom, my grandma, we went out there, and it was all very true.
So I could spend this whole podcast listing off all the schools that have offered you at this point, because it is a long, long list. I mean, you obviously got a lot of the Pac, well, I guess the Pac-12 is dying a little bit, but you have all the West Coast powers. Oregon's offered, Washington, but then also you're hearing from schools like Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, a lot of great schools. Obviously, they've been talking to you. My question outside of the Notre Dame, obviously, slants to this podcast is, what are some other schools that are standing out currently that are also doing a really great job with you?
A lot of the West Coast schools, I feel like, it's a lot easier. They can come to school when, whenever their coaches travel. It's closer. But I think definitely the West Coast schools, obviously Notre Dame, Maryland's also doing a great job. So, a couple schools out east. I mean, I'm really just appreciative for all the schools that, I've given the opportunity to play football at. And most schools are, still in touch with me. So that's good to know.
Well, I know we talked about this in the past when I had done a phone interview with you, but just kind of, looking forward to, when you do have to finally make that final decision, right? What are some things that matter to you, to your family? Like, what are ideal things that you're looking for in a school that are going to kind of separate that final decision?
For me, I mean, a big thing is obviously the bond with the coaching staff, right? I mean, I feel like it's hard I'm a big relationship guy, so it's hard for me to play somebody who maybe is a great football coach, but I don't like them as a person. And really also the development as a player that I'm going to get. You know, Obviously my goals and dreams are to play in the NFL. And so I want to go somewhere that I have a really great relationship with the coaches, get a good education, and get developed.
And my last question for you, Marco, is just on whatever a timeline might be. One, do you have any sort of timeline for when you would ultimately like to make a decision? Like, is there anything out there as for like ideally, I would like to have a commitment made by this date? That would be like the perfect world type of situation.
Not right now, to be quite honest. For me, it's kind of just feeling it out. There's no like certain time. I mean, I'm working to be a mid-year, so we'll see. If it would have to be before that, obviously.
Sure.
But no like certain time for me. So, hopefully I can start to, talk with my family, because, time is definitely moving fast.
Yes.
But yeah, there's no timeline for me, or time I really am looking forward to commit ideally.
Man, you're going to be a mid-year guy too, so your workload right now is outrageous. I'm sure you're taking all extra schoolwork and everything, man. But Marco, I really appreciate you again taking a little bit of time. Hey, every major recruiting platform out there, I'm speaking to you now. I'm not speaking to Marco. Can you rate this guy as a top 50 player at least? Can you please do that for me? He's one of the top players in the 2025 class, obviously out of the state of California. Marco, I really appreciate you for joining the show, man. It's very much appreciated, especially after the holidays. You're out there in LA. You're putting your work in, man. Thank you so much for joining the show today. And I definitely want to have you back on again, man. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate it.
Well, Sean, that's Marco Jones, star linebacker out of the state of California. I hope everyone enjoyed that conversation. Sean, it just kind of fits the stereotype, doesn't he? As far as like Notre Dame kid. Sounds like it. It sounds like he was born to be there. So we'll see. It's not going to be an easy one for Notre Dame. They're going to have to fight with some of the big dogs, man. Some of the West Coast powers, and some other SEC schools are hearing from him. I mean, he's got Alabama offer, Georgia offer. He's gonna have to. They're gonna have to play the long game here. They have to play hard with him.
That's becoming par for the course under Marcus Freeman's leadership. Like, it's the big dogs we're fighting. Yeah. This is where you shot down the main aisle. Unlike what we heard previously, where it was told to Notre Dame fans, we have to shop down a different aisle and recruit. No, you don't. Yep. No, you don't.
You don't?
Just have some courage. Just have some courage. That's all.
I agree 100%. And we're going to get into mailbag next again, guys. That's the linebacker recruiting. If there's any more specific questions about linebacker recruiting, you can ask at any time, and we'll be able to talk about it a little bit. I know there was big news that is breaking that Alabama is set to hire Kalen DeBoer as their head coach or negotiations. So we can talk about that as well in the mailbag. Before we do, though, folks, make sure for us, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. If you're listening to us on YouTube, make sure you hit the notification bell as well. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, make sure hit us with a 5-star review, rate and review, and we'll catch you guys on the mailbag section of the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, Sean. So let's get into the mailbag. I don't know, man. Like, before we pull up questions, because we have a bunch of questions already. People can throw more questions in. I think we're going to get a guest at some point in this mailbag as well to have a little bit of a nice conversation. Do you want to start with the Kalen DeBoer stuff? I mean, should we just start with that? It's kind of an interesting topic, man. I don't know. So for people that aren't on Twitter, aren't on X, they haven't seen the news yet, it has been reported by multiple platforms now that Kalen DeBoer and Notre Dame and Alabama are in contract negotiation phase of this process. So barring something setback last minute, it does appear that it is going to be Kalen DeBoer as the next head coach at Alabama. Interesting one, Sean, though, right? Like, I mean, one, and I was looking this up while the interview was playing because I knew that it would probably be a topic of conversation. Kalen DeBoer has been a head coach. I was looking this up. He's been a head coach at Sioux Falls, where he played. It's in South Dakota, Division II school. He's been head coach, obviously, at Fresno State most recently and Washington. Sean, do you know what Kalen DeBoer's record as a head coach is in his career?
Incredible.
Yes, that's a good word for it. 104-12 in his career. 104-12. Obviously, a lot of that was spent at Sioux Falls, which is a D2 school, but regardless, been a very good head coach in his short term. Did a tremendous job at Fresno State. Did a great job the last couple years at Washington as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear your thoughts about this, though, Sean, because I look at this though, and I say, because I mean, on the hoof, on like the taking a step back for a second on ground level, I think it's a very good hire because I think that Alabama got a really good coach who also has been recruiting pretty well at Washington. So like, that's cool. But here are the places that Kalen DeBoer has been in his career. Sioux Falls, which is in South Dakota. Washington High School, which is in South Dakota. Sioux Falls again, which is in South Dakota. Southern Illinois, which you get is in Southern Illinois. Eastern Michigan. Fresno State. Indiana. Fresno State again. And then Washington. So, Sean, he has been on the West Coast. He spent a little bit of time in the Midwest. That's the only places he's been. And now he's going down to the Southeastern Conference. Now, ultimately, I don't think it will matter. I think he'll end up doing a very good job at Alabama. But it is a very interesting fit because it's just not a guy that's ever spent time in the Southeast. Like, it just isn't a place that he has ever frequented. Just in general, has never had a job down in the Southeast. Your thoughts early on Kalen DeBoer as the head coach at Alabama?
I think it is a blessing in disguise for Alabama. I don't think it's their first choice. I think they struck out on their initial choices, and maybe a couple of guys on there at the top of the list were pipe dreams, because it makes no sense for Kirby Smart to leave Georgia. And it makes no sense for Steve Sarkisian to leave Texas. But if you have to fall back on Kalen DeBoer, from a coaching standpoint, he's right there on the same level, or maybe a little bit below the guys that you went after initially. He's definitely, if the reports are true that they actually interviewed Tommy Rees, he's definitely a couple of steps up from Tommy Rees being at the head of that program. So
Yep.
I'm very interested in seeing.
Wait, you mean Tommy Rees wasn't a good candidate for Alabama? You don't think he was a good candidate?
I just said Caleb DeBoer is a better candidate.
Yes, I would agree, Sean. I would agree.
I'm not going to speak on Tommy Rees. I just think Caleb DeBoer is a better candidate. But it seems like this is like their third or fourth choice, and that's a hell of a third or fourth choice, yo.
It's a great third or fourth choice. I mean, yeah. So that's a great note, though, Sean. Is that the person that I was hearing early on was Steve Sarkisian.
Mhm.
That was the guy, Steve. I know they had some interest in Dan Lanning. That one kind of ended pretty quickly, though. Like there wasn't much traction at that point. Steve Sarkisian's name was thrown out there. And then it kind of got to the Kalen DeBoer, I guess, tier of where they wanted to go with this conversation, because some other names that were thrown in there, Sean, like it wasn't a thing. Like it wasn't. Lane Kiffin was one that his name was thrown in there, and I'm like, dude, if you guys knew some backstory to his time in Alabama and his relationship with Nick Saban back then, he is not going to be the next head coach of Alabama after Nick Saban. It was never going to happen. Lane Kiffin's name being thrown out there was just like, dude, give me a break. He is not going to be the next head coach of Alabama. Kalen DeBoer, though, was not on my short list, Sean. I thought it was going to be Steve Sark. I thought it was going to be Sarkisian. I know that Mike Norvell's name was thrown in there a little bit as well. I think that there was contact from everything that I can gather on that one end as well. I really like the potential here, though, Sean, if we're talking about the positives of Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer is a genius offensively. Genius. What has been the negative to Alabama this past year and a couple years from now? This past couple years, the offense is starting to trend down a little bit, man. Starting to trend down a little bit. Defense has still been good. Defense has still been very good. But they won this year based upon athleticism at the quarterback position, being able to run the football, and defensively, they were very good, right? This immediately, Kalen DeBoer immediately improves the offense, and I think that they take a nice step forward in that department. Like, I think that's a known commodity that we'll see.
Do you think that's enough for the players that are currently there? Because we've seen the rumors about Caleb Downs, some other Isaiah Bond jumped into the portal today.
Yeah.
Does he have enough cachet? Like,
is he a sexy enough of a hire? Is basically what you're saying. Like, is that
because now the 24 kids can leave.
They can leave. Yeah.
So
it's going to be interesting, because although Alabama can touch pretty much any part of the country they want, they are going to secure most of their commits from the Southeastern kids. I mean, that's where they're going to frequent the most. They're not going to leave Florida, Georgia, Alabama, like that stream too much. Like they'll go into Texas, they'll go out west when they want to, like they'll do that. Right. But so immediately my thought is like, I don't know what relationships previously Kalen DeBoer had with any of those kids in the 2024 class. I don't know. I truly don't know. I think the one good thing is that apparently the president or AD, I forget who it was urging the players on the roster for Notre Dame. For Alabama, give it 72 hours. Give it 72 hours, and then just at least hear who it is. So I think that this first conversation Kalen DeBoer is going to have with the team is going to be very important, man. It's going to be huge. It's going to be really important, because either players are going to buy in, or they're going to be like, nah, I'm good. Like you might be a good coach, but you're not Nick Saban. And I was here for Nick Saban. So I don't know, though. I mean, that all that to say is like, I'm not sure how much roster turnover is going to kill it. I really don't.
I think his coaching staff is going to be vitally important.
You think maybe he tries to retain some of the previous coaching staff?
Maybe? The job Jimmy Lake has done at Washington, you put him in the SEC, I think they continue to get good defensive backs. If Jimmy Lake comes with him, but Jimmy Lake might get some offers. Does he stay at Washington?
I meant Bama. Does he try to keep a couple of the Bama assistants now that he's going to Bama? You don't think that there's any? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you bring Ryan Grubb with you?
Oh, I would definitely bring Ryan Grubb. There's no question. I would 100% bring Ryan Grubb. But is there a couple defensive staff members in Alabama? I'm not saying DC, like, at the highest level, but is there couple position coaches that you're like, that could ease the transition a little bit, just a
Well,
little
he's
bit.
walking into a structure when it comes to the number of staff and analysts and the culture that Nick Saban has already established. He's walking into like a great situation, right? So now it's like,
Yep.
I bring Ryan Grubb, I bring Jimmy Lake. I can nitpick or handpick the guys I want to bring with me, and then I can have a conversation. But I don't think Tommy Reese will be retained. I think
I'd be
Jamarcus Shepard.
shocked. I'd be shocked
Jamarcus
if he was
Shepard.
retained.
I can see him bringing Jamarcus Shepard with him.
I would bring the whole offensive coaching staff if you could, like the whole gag. Come bring them up,
Right.
bring them down.
Yeah, because I think Jamarcus Shepard is somebody that Ryan Williams is probably aware
Has
of.
relationship with, yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah, the coaching staff is going to be of most importance, but I do think he'll have probably 3 to 4 slots, maybe more, that he'll have to interview and bring guys in.
Yep.
I will be very interested in seeing who his D-line coach is and his DC.
It's going to be interesting if you're going to try to splice this together a little bit, or you're going to go a little bit outside of the reach. Like, I mean, you're Alabama, right? So no stop there, right? Like, if you want a guy, you can go out and get a guy financially. Like, that should be no issue at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at worst, I think that he probably brings a couple of his offensive guys with him. I mean, like, even Sean, if like Ryan Grubb wants to go out for a bigger pasture, like let's say he's up for the Washington job in theory, like, I mean, bring Jamarcus Shepard to be your OC, right? And then, that's
the thing. Washington,
it's an easy transition. Yeah.
You're going into the Big Ten. Like, are you cool just promoting from within, or do you now go swing for somebody that has head coaching experience? Right, because you don't exactly want your program to take a step back going into the Big Ten.
Sure. Yeah. Agree.
Or my God.
Yeah.
There's continuity as well.
Because we start with obviously the Alabama conversation, which is, the pertinence to Alabama hiring him. But the Washington side is going to get not great, man, most likely. I mean, Sean, like they were going to have a lot of turnover this offseason in general. I mean, you're Michael Penix to the NFL. You're going to have Roma Dunze to the NFL. Jaden Polk has already announced to go to the NFL. Jalen McMillan's going to the NFL. The left tackle, Troy Fontanu, is going to the NFL. I think Roger Rosengarten, the right tackle, might go to the NFL. You're going to have a lot of the defense, too, like Braylon Trice going to the NFL. Jabbar Muhammad might go to the NFL. You were losing a lot of players regardless.
Yeah.
And you're going to the Big Ten, man. And you're going to the Big Ten. Not the best situation to be if you're the University of Washington football.
And something that bears watching, like, Tayshawn Lyons already hopped into the portal.
Yes, he did.
Notre Dame fans are familiar with him. Now we have to watch the Robinson kid. Now that the board's gone, those 24 kids get to see if they want to leave. This is about to get very interesting, man. Because the Washington recruiting class was really good.
It was. Man, I forgot about Jason Robinson, man. Oh, I hate this because I had a good relationship with Paul Menke. You remember Paul Menke?
Mm-hmm.
He was committed to Duke. He flipped once Elko left, and then he flipped to Washington. And now DeBoer's going to go to Alabama. Literally, the last two coaches he's committed to him. That stinks for guys like Paul Menke, man. That really stinks. Sean, this is like the worst time for Washington to have a coaching change too. You're feeling great about your trajectory. You're going to the Big Ten, and then all of a sudden it's like the rug gets pulled out from under you, man. You're like, dang. And Notre Dame prevalence.
Yeah.
Someone asked in the chat, and we'll get to it, but like there's a couple kids that Notre Dame is recruiting. Mostly I'm talking about Derek Meadows in the 2025 class of wide receiver, where it was like, he's basically said in the past that like Notre Dame, Washington are his top two schools. And it's like, I guess if Ryan Grubb maybe is the next head coach there, maybe that helps you maintain that relationship. Like,
keeps the continuity, the recruiting class in place. It probably does.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brandon Plesser just said, is Menke not at Duke? No, Brandon. So Paul Menke was committed to Duke. Then Elko left, and he ended up flipping on signing day to Washington. He flipped to Washington. And now Yeah. So a kid's in a tough situation, man. It's in a tough situation. So couple recruits that it might affect, but either way, crazy times, man. Crazy times with Kalen DeBoer expected to be the next head coach at Alabama, barring some last minute setbacks and contract negotiations as we speak. Let's get into some other questions, though, Sean. Let's get this, man. Oh, man. The state of college football is so weird, isn't it? It is a weird time to follow college football right now. It's a very strange time. All right, let's go to a couple questions here.
Let's get it.
All right. Oh, let's start with this one, Sean. It's a little down the list, but I think it's an interesting question. ND Milton fan. What's up? Nathan says, what is a good comp for Marco Jones, the linebacker out of California that we had the interview with earlier? You have a comp for him? Sean, my closest comp is he's a praying mantis. That's what he looks like on the football field.
Yo, that was one of my favorite.
All arms and legs, man.
That's one of my favorite villains on cartoons back in the day, man.
Oh man, praying mantis. Yeah. Wait, was that what's that from? Is that from
Super Friends, right?
Yes.
He was Aquaman's nemesis.
Yes. I believe you're correct. Yep. Man, that's a good question though. So comp wise,
Marco. Go ahead. I'll let you go first.
No, I'm literally just talking out loud because I'm trying to think, because we're talking about a 6'4" plus kid who's going to be 240, who has long arms. He could play either Mike or Will. He can run. He's got a huge tackle radius, and he could also play on the edge at times. Like that's. Someone said Tremaine Edmonds in the chat. That's not bad. I think he is maybe a little bit more versatile than Tremaine is, because I know Tremaine's long as heck, but like he's not a guy that you're going to put on the edge a ton if you don't, for any reason really. Man, that's a tough one, man. Honestly, that's a great question, Nathan. I legitimately don't have a good one. I was going to say like Zach Cunningham that came out of Vanderbilt a few years ago that played with the Texans because he was like super long. But I genuinely don't have a great one, Sean. I don't know. How about LeVar Arrington? Can I throw back to an oldie but goodie, LeVar Arrington? I don't know, man. We'll say LeVar Arrington. LeVar was a little more physically dense, obviously, when he came out and he was drafted by the Redskins, but he was kind of that guy that was like long, could play inside linebacker, could play edge. Like LeVar Arrington, we'll say. LeVar, sure. Oh, Anthony Barr, someone said. I think that's very interesting.
Anthony Barr is interesting.
One. Yeah.
I can go further back. Body type, he's very much like Kevin Hardy from Illinois. Body type, 6'4". That combination of him and Simeon Rice, boy, that takes me back. Whew.
I love Simeon, man. He was one of my favorite pass rushers in the NFL. I love Simeon Rice.
Yeah.
That Tampa Bay defense was sick. I used to love that defense, man. Simeon and Warren Sapp. Did I tell you Warren Sapp was actually down at the All-American Bowl? He was at the Combine.
Really?
He was walking around in his gold jacket.
Working for Colorado?
I don't even know what he was doing, man. He had his gold jacket on, Sean, and he was just walking around singing the whole time, man. I was just like, this guy is just enjoying his time, man.
Must be nice.
Must be nice. Yeah. He interesting guy. Very interesting. But John Lynch was one of my favorites because that dude played hard, man. He was a menace. Menace in the middle of the field. Rondé Barber, very underrated corner that just went in the Hall of Fame. Really good football player. Derek Brooks is one of the OG Will linebackers of all time, man. Derek Brooks was a stud. And funny enough, do you know who won the MVP during their Super Bowl win that year? Of all the defensive players, who do you think
Rondé? No.
Dexter
Jackson. That's right.
Dexter Jackson, man.
That's like Kevin Smith winning the Super Bowl MVP for the Cowboys. Like
right, yeah. Or Timmy Smith for the Redskins back in the day. Remember running for like 200 yards? I don't even think he won MVP. I think Doug Williams won it, but like still, it's pretty hilarious.
James Washington won it one year for the Cowboys. It's like,
yeah, some of these like obscure players where you're just like, really? He won MVP that day? That's
man.
Yeah. But yeah.
Timmy Smith had a day now.
Timmy Smith ran for like 200 yards. He had a great game. He had a great game.
He had a day.
But that was easily the best game of his career. Like, easily the best game of his career. He never had anything like it again, which is just hilarious. But I mean, Doug Williams was also like, what was Doug that day? Like 24 to 28 for like whatever that he did. That I mean, the Redskins could not get stopped that day.
Now, I don't know if he's as fast, but he plays, if you look at the body type,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the way he plays the inside position.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He has a, because he plays upright as well. Like when you watch Marco play, you can tell he plays like he's 6'4". Like,
yep,
you can tell. He has, it's almost like he's not, I don't know if he's as fast as Peyton Wilson. But Peyton Wilson is that 6'4".
That's not a bad comp. It's not a bad
guy on
comp
the inside as well. Not like I said, I'm not sitting here saying he's as fast or we'll see. Only time will tell. But just body type wise,
mm-hmm.
and the way they play on film. Yeah.
Actually, I like that, man. Peyton Wilson is because he's kind of lanky, right? Like Marco is.
Yeah.
Obviously, Peyton's body never developed into an edge, but like as a lanky inside linebacker who can run for days, like I could see it. I could see it. I like that. I like that, man. Peyton Wilson. That's a very interesting one. All right, let's move down to Adam Blair asked this one, Sean. I kind of hinted on this already, but he just said, could this help with Derek Meadows' recruitment? I know he liked Washington. Talked about it a ton. Could it help?
Well,
Heck yeah. Heck yeah, it could help. Certainly won't hurt you. I mean, the top other contender might be in a little bit of a transition right now. Might be in a little bit of a transitional period. I mean, could Notre Dame take advantage of this and, close on Derek Meadows, the wide receiver out of Bishop Gorman in Nevada? It's possible. It's very possible. Yeah. Sean, have you seen the new wide receiver offer yesterday? Elijah Burris?
I
did.
did.
See him? Okay. All right. Let's get this one then from Brandon Plensner, who says, Ryan and Sean, thoughts breakdown on the new wide receiver offer out of New Jersey. So an interesting one, Sean. I'll let you give your thoughts first, but it's Elijah Burris. He goes to DePaul Catholic in North Jersey, which is it's the Catholic North Jersey schools. So like they play like Bergen Catholic, St. Peter's, like Paramus Catholic. I mean, like they play some really good teams. Elijah Burris is actually the son of Plexico Burris, former Michigan State wide receiver, New York Giants, was a very good player, obviously, for them. And obviously, he is settled in as a North Jersey guy now at DePaul Catholic. So early thoughts, Sean. I know he's listed at 6'1", 170 pounds. It was a weird offer at first, to be honest with you, because I looked and I said he wasn't ranked on any single service. No offer. And he really has a small offer list right now. But the film I thought was pretty intriguing. I don't know if you felt the same.
No, the film is definitely intriguing. And, when you hear that, this is Plax's son, you're expecting to see like 6'4", 6'5", and then you see 6'1", 170. It's like, okay.
I thought I was going to see 6'5" and like not great speed, and that is not at all what I thought.
That's not at all what we saw. We saw the exact opposite watching this kid's film. And like you said, man, his suddenness in and out of breaks and his ability to avoid tackles and run after the catch is what stood out to me when watching this film. That was the first thing I was surprised by. Like I said, I was expecting one thing and saw something totally different. He ran a couple of out routes, he was just sudden in the break. And I'm like, oh, okay. But why wouldn't he, right? Like, why wouldn't he know how to run routes? His dad is Plexico Burris, man. So this NFL pipeline is something that Notre Dame seems to be tapping into. Like guys who come from NFL DNA, NFL heritage that know the game, right?
Yep.
And what I've learned is that a lot of these kids that come from that background, their parents don't force the game on them.
Yep.
Right? And so a lot of these kids have a love for the game that they had to find on their own. You'll hear it like, oh man, I really didn't start playing football. Bryce Young, man, I really didn't start getting into football probably until like 9th grade, 10th grade. Like that's when I really figured out, this is what I want to do. And that goes a long way, right? Because we've seen not NFL DNA, but Corey Robinson, great DNA, NBA DNA, but that love for the game really wasn't there. He just happened to be long and good with great hands. Like, I can just walk on the field and just make plays at wide receiver, but no, he really didn't love the game like that. And I think with kids like this, you start to see like, okay, he loves the game. It comes across in his play. He doesn't have, not being 6'5" and 210 like his dad, it's probably a little chip on his shoulder because he's like, okay, now I have something to prove, right? Because if I just had the genes or the size, I could rest on that. And he's just 6'1". If he's 6'1", he's probably 6 feet, 170.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you watch the film and it's like, oh, okay, all right. Dude, I love this with this Notre Dame staff, man. Like, we know the guys, the Marco Jones, right? Highly ranked. Everybody loves them. But this staff gives us these, okay, let me look at the film. And then you watch the film and it's like, oh, I see why. Okay, I can see why they like him. But once again, remember last week we talked about, I think I talked about it with Brian on one of the shows last week. It's going to be interesting to see the guys that get added to the offer sheet because of the new wide receiver coach. I was like, it's going to be interesting to see guys that Mike Brown has a relationship with or is interested in that might not have been, guys that the previous coach would have put on the offer sheet. And, Lil Plax is, I've started calling him, could be that one of those guys. And I'm interested in seeing some other guys that come into the fray.
I think this is one that is maybe the first indicator of the Mike Brown hire as far as like where it might be moving, because like they hired Raiden Vines Bright out of Arizona that is actually transferring to IMG Academy for his senior year. But Sean, they were doing work on him before Mike Brown even came and before Chancey Stuckey was gone. Like, he was a guy that they were doing their homework on for months at that point. So them offering them was kind of expected at some point. Like, I thought that it was going to happen at some point. It didn't surprise me at all. This one, like, I'll be honest, like, I didn't know who this kid was at first. And then I actually texted. So I do a podcast with Matt Sims, like Chris Sims' brother, Phil Sims' son. And he's a North Jersey guy. He was a where did he go? He went to Don Bosco Prep in North Jersey, and he actually coached at Don Bosco Prep. So I messaged it, I sent it to him because I knew that was kind of his stomping grounds. I was like, dude, who's this kid? You know this kid? And then he's like, yeah, man, it's Plexico's son. It's Plexico's son. Yeah, I know him. And then I was like, oh, just give me your opinion on him. And he said something like, kid is very, very physically gifted. He's still figuring it out on the football field, but he is a guy that probably is going to rise dramatically on the recruiting side of things, because right now he doesn't have an impressive offer list. I think of this, Sean, as a little bit of trying to get ahead of the curve on Elijah Burris, because I think that he could be a kid that rises a bit because his film is pretty impressive. It is. I mean, one, he's sleek. He's pretty fast. He's very quick. He runs great routes, really good route runner, fantastic route runner, but he's not overly productive right now at his high school level as a junior. He wasn't overly productive. He only had like 400 something yards and like 20 something catches. Average like almost 18 yards a catch though, which is nice to see, but he's still a little bit of a projection. And the way I think of it is, because where do people mind immediately go with this type of stuff, Sean, is that, oh, they offered him, they must be doing terrible with this guy, with player X, player Z, and this is their insurance. And it's like, no, guys, sometimes staffs just try to get ahead of the curve on players. Like, not sure that the kid's a take right now, but if he takes the jump that we think he could this offseason, then maybe he is at some point. Like, maybe he's that type of guy. Not every time a player is offered is it just like an automatic, that kid's a take. They're closing on that kid. That kid's a foregone conclusion. Like, no, I kind of feel like, just based upon kind of not knowing too much about him and just kind of hearing a little bit about him, I think that Notre Dame has offered this kid to be ahead of the curve in case he does take that step up. Because what's the worst case scenario, Sean? You offered him and you don't have a lot of interest in him, and so you don't recruit him that heavily. Okay, nothing hurts you. Like, you don't get hurt in that situation at all. So I don't know if if it's a situation where Notre Dame is fully entrenched with like, hey, we're going after Elijah Burgess. We would take him today. I think this is more of that kid has a lot of talents, little rough around the edges, still needs to develop, needs to have a big senior year. But if he does, then maybe he's the guy for us, right? So I just think they're trying to get ahead of themselves a little bit on that one.
Get ahead of them, form a relationship. More than that, form a relationship with the dad, who's I'm sure is going to be very pivotal in his recruitment, and then get him to, the big summertime junior day, and let him, let Mike Brown lay his eyes on him, right? Because it's one thing to watch film, but we don't know if Mike Brown hasn't been to a game recruiting another kid and saw him, so
yeah.
But yeah, I'm very interested. When I saw it, I said, okay, I have to check this kid out. I have to check this kid out. Like I said, I like what I saw. Like, you looking at the production and you're like, all right, but
this reminds me of a kid, Sean, where it's like at some point, like Michigan comes in, a couple ACC schools come in, and they start becoming a little bit of a hot commodity. And then Notre Dame's like, ha, we were already here, guys. We already beat you. Because that matters, right? Like then taking a chance on them early before like not a lot of offer. Because right now it's like them, Cincinnati, there's a couple others, but like it's not an impressive offer list right now. But if it starts to become an impressive offer list, then Notre Dame has that little bit of foresight to be like, hey, we knew this was coming, which it might be coming. I could see him having a big off season and maybe having like a crazy rise as a senior. We'll see. But either way, nothing wrong with getting ahead just in case, right? A little bit of a early work on a player. Nothing wrong with that at all.
The kid has suddenness, man.
Yes, he does.
Yes, he has suddenness, and I definitely like that. And he had a couple of impressive plays catching the ball with his hands over the middle.
He did.
A lot of kids going over the middle automatically go to the body catch. His dad had great hands,
Yep.
Would snag the ball out of the air. So
yeah, you're right. Well, Sean, that was my weirdest thing though. I wish I would have led with the film on him and looked at the film before I looked at the recruiting profile and the stats on the season, because the stats just don't match the film right now. The offer list doesn't match the film. Like, the film's good. It just
I would ask, okay, what system do they run?
Right.
How's the quarterback? Like,
they also have another junior the same year as him that was like their leading receiver. He had almost twice as many yards as he had. So I don't know if that kid's good or not.
The crazy thing is, he jumped out to me on the film. Like, if you watch one of the plays, I'm looking to the left and I see the release, and I'm like, yo, who is that kid with that release? So, yeah.
He plays in a very talent-rich area as well. I'm not just like tooting the New Jersey horn for a second, but like, he plays against Bergen Catholic. He plays against St. Peter's. He plays against Paramus Catholic. Like, there's a lot of good schools in North Jersey, man. A lot of good football. Let's play. South Jersey, not as much, but like North Jersey, a lot of good football teams up there. All the Catholic schools up there are really good. So
Northern Jersey has one of the best outlets. What's it called?
Which one's that?
Shortbread, is that the name of it?
Shortbread.
It's an outlet mall in Jersey. It's fantastic.
Okay. Huh? I don't know that one.
Fantastic.
I need to look that up.
Yeah.
We had Frank G just with a little bit of insight. He said for Ryan and Sean, the other wide receiver's name is Zai Cole. He's a 4-star wide receiver by 247 with offers from some really big schools. DePaul Catholic has some talent for next year. Yeah, they always do. DePaul's always one of those schools that we even had remember Jalen McMillan this past cycle too, Sean. He was a Seton Hall prep kid up in North Jersey as well. So yeah, man, they play a lot of good ball up there. And thank you for the little bit of insight there, Frank. Very much appreciated, my man. All right, let's go to. We had Brandon Plensner with a question. Actually, we just answered one from Brandon. Hold the horses here, Brandon. 99 problems with BK ain't one. Said, would Notre Dame take 4 linebackers if 2 of them had positional flexibility? Thinking Marco Jones as a will, Viper money, and Kia as a rover with future will potential or opportunities as he gets in the strength program. Sean, I kind of mentioned that. I think that's possible. Yeah. I think you could potentially, if you had, because if you had Marco Jones in the class, I think that you could stretch it one more linebacker because you could look at him and say, hey, he could outgrow linebacker at some point. He could be a Viper eventually. And if he does, then we have our, I don't want to say backup plan, but we have our insurance as another inside linebacker in the system as well. And then Kia being able to play a couple of different spots. Anthony Sacca, if you get Anthony Sacca, he could be a rover. He could be a will as well. So I think it helps, Sean, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. Man, look, I'm so excited about this linebacker recruiting class potential, man.
I know, man.
Three definitely. I wouldn't be mad if they. Oh, like you said, this is a class where they can go over 26, maybe get up to 26, and take some guys. Which is funny, man, because when you talk about certain positions in 25, you're like, okay, this is not a good position in this class. But overall, as a class, it's a ton of talent.
Sure
just
is.
collectively. Would you
Agree.
have off the bat your initial reaction when you first started watching 24 kids versus when you first started watching 25 kids?
Oh man, I remember, Sean, we were even entrenched in 2024. Like we knew all the names at that point, and I remember seeing the 2025 kids, the list that was sent obviously before the pot of gold on St. Patrick's Day. I started watching some of the kids, and I'm like, holy smokes, man! It was just like one after the other too. I mean, I remember watching first quarterback I watched because I already knew about Bryce Underwood, right? I was like, who the heck is Deuce Knight? What kind of name is this? Who's Deuce Knight? And I fought Deuce Knight in. I'm like, oh, that's Deuce Knight. Like that's Deuce Knight. And I watched a couple other quarterbacks, and I remember he didn't end up with Notre Dame. Obviously, he's committed to Alabama. But Anthony Rogers was a kid. I think he's at I think he was at Nevada. I think he was at a school in Alabama, and now he's down at IMG, a running back. And his name was like I think it was Turbo. I think they called him Turbo. And I watched his film show and I'm like, Jesus, man. Like, where do these kids come from? This is insane. And then you start getting into the Anthony Saccas and the Christopher Burgesses and like all these dudes. And you're just like, dude, these kids are wildly good. Like wild. Offensive lineman. I remember watching Owen Streebig wasn't even offered on Pot of Gold, but I remember watching Owen Streebig's sophomore film when he got offered. I'm just like, this kid's 6'8", 290 already. How the heck is this a thing? Like, how is this possible? It's wild, man.
Crazy. Ugh. I'm sorry, I gave you. It's not Jersey. I was thinking no. It's Woodbury Commons.
Okay.
It's actually in New York. Yeah.
I would say New York. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was in North Jersey.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I was like, what the heck is that? Never heard of that before. But all right, let's go to 99 Problems again has said, not exactly recruiting related, but why doesn't Notre Dame use Jordan Botelho in the way you just described Dominic Hulak? Have someone else, Burnham and Traore, full-time at Viper, seems like a better skill set fit to me. What do you think about that, Sean? As Botelho as like a movable chess piece, he could blitz A, he could blitz outside, he could play some Viper.
I'm the wrong person to ask about Jordan Botelho, man. Okay,
what's that mean? Are you tapped out? Are you tapped out of Jordan Botelho?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the word tapped out. I'm like, dude, plenty of opportunity, man. Opportunity has been given. If he decides to, if he starts to fall down, the depth chart, I would not mind. I'm just at that point. If we start seeing younger kids getting more snaps, I wouldn't mind. I think after the Clemson game, when I saw him literally on a running play turn his back to the blocker, I was like, okay. Yeah. And I was like, I had high expectations. Oh, I did as well. Yeah. I did as well, but what is the old saying? When somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong there, man. He was. I don't want to say it like this because it sounds really mean, but like, was he your biggest disappointment of 2023, player wise? He's probably top 2 or
Oh,
3.
heck no. There's nobody disappointed me more than 10. No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fair. That's fair.
No,
But
no
let's
one
rephrase
disappointed
it.
me more than 10.
Biggest disappointment on the defensive side of the football.
Um,
So I don't think anybody else really disappointed me.
no.
Yeah.
No. I
It was
guess
just
you're
Jordan,
right.
man. Yeah. Offensively, you mentioned like Hartman, the wide receivers just in general were a little disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
Blake Fisher. Oh, Blake Fisher's number 1 for me. I think on the whole team. I think he's the number 1 for me, man. I was not a Blake guy
I can
this
see
year.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
But at least Blake had shown
Something, yeah. Right.
something
Yeah.
on a consistent basis previously.
Sure.
We've been waiting for that.
We have been waiting for that.
Yeah, literally the joint is literally on the border of Jersey. That's why I thought it was in Jersey. It's like literally right there at the border. But yeah.
Got it.
But no, it is I don't think anybody comes close. Patello on defense and definitely Fisher on offense.
Because not many guys on defense really underwhelmed this year, right? Like everybody played pretty well for the most part. I guess you could throw Benjamin Morrison's tackling into there, but like he still had really good coverage this year, so like that's good. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, he's a slightly built kid,
yeah. Oh man, that's funny. It's really funny. All right, let's get into a couple more here. I'll pull up one of Brandon's questions since he got mad at me. All right, Brandon Plensner, who are the other players for Shanklin? How big of a threat is Tennessee or Michigan, USC? Brandon, the only thing that would make me worried about Damian Shanklin, Sean, the only one is if Ohio State offered. That would be the only one, man. Brandon, I hate to. I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it. Hated. Notre Dame is in the driving seat for Damian Shanklin. Unless Ohio State offered, I just think that that's kind of how it's going to stay. Like, I think it's Notre Dame's to lose with Shanklin. I really do. I guess if you had gun to my head, Michigan, I guess, but like not really. I don't know, man. I just think it's Notre Dame unless Ohio State comes in, and then Ohio State would make it at least an interesting battle. So
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
USC, I wouldn't worry about USC.
No.
And
Tennessee,
that's another thing. Yeah. That's another thing we're starting to learn. Like fit matters in recruiting as well, man. Like I forget who you were talking about. I don't think it was Shanklin, but you were just saying like I just don't see this kid leaving the Midwest. I think it was Christian Jones. I think it was Christian Jones you were talking about. And he's a Nebraska Notre Dame type kid. You can just see the fit.
Yeah.
And you would be shocked if he went to the West Coast to the SEC.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. Yeah. Yeah. Christian Jones is definitely one of those though. Like Christian Jones is going to end up at Notre Dame, Nebraska, or like Wisconsin or something. Like that's just where he's going to end up, Like he's not leaving, man. He's just not. I'd be shocked if he left.
Absolutely. By the way, man, Wisconsin's doing a really good job in the transfer portal.
Are they actually?
Yeah, they're doing a decent job. No, they're doing a decent job.
I haven't looked at their class. You know who's doing a pretty good job? One that I like is Indiana is doing a pretty good job in the transfer portal.
Nah, I did not know that. Really?
Yeah. I'm trying to look it up, man. But they yeah, let me look that up real quick because I know they got a couple kids in the portal that I was like, oh, okay, I like that. I'm trying to find that real quick. I can't remember who a couple of the players are, but I was looking at because they have a pretty lengthy list, Sean, because obviously they had, they wanted to rebuild that roster pretty quickly with the new coaching staff coming in because they got shoot, who's the coach they just got? It's dang. I know him very well too. He was at Elon at one point as the head coach, and I think he was at James Madison previously. What the heck is the guy's name? It's gonna drive me crazy. Oh, what's his name? Someone help me in the chat. What is the Kurt Signetti? Thank you so much, Kirk Signetti. He is he's a good coach overall. He's actually rebuilt a couple like really struggling programs, but he has been busy in the transfer portal, and I'm trying to find it real quick because it is I was impressed, man. Not a school that I would have thought would have a big impact in the transfer portal anytime soon, Sean, because I mean it's Indiana, but I mean Kursignetti. So this is what they have so
But
far
Allen has some success there.
in the portal.
Indiana is a place. No, I'm just saying in general. Like
Oh
Indiana has been
yeah.
a place where guys have been able initially to have success, no matter who the coach is. Like, yeah, most guys now sustaining that success
Yep.
is a totally different conversation. But initially, most of the head coaches there have had some semblance of success early.
So first and foremost, he came in and I think he got a couple guys to come back that were in the transfer portal. He got his wide receiver Donovan McCulley to come back, who's like a 6'5" former quarterback there. He also taught Carter Smith, the young offensive tackle, to come back as well, who played a lot for them. They got Curtis Rourke from Ohio, this kid I liked a lot. They got Elijah Surratt from James Madison, who was a 1,000-yard receiver this year. He was a really good player for James Madison.
Mm-hmm.
They talked Trent Holland to come back to school. They got James Carpenter from James Madison, the defensive tackle, who's a good football player. Elijah Green from North Carolina, the running back, is transferring to Indiana. They got Miles Price, wide receiver from Texas Tech, to come down. Nick Kidwell from James Madison. Jalen Walker from James Madison. Justice Ellison, a guy that we know from Wake Forest, is going to Indiana now as a running back. Trey Wedig, who's a offensive lineman from Wisconsin, is going to Indiana. Like, they've had some movement there, man. They've had some movement there with Indiana. I've been kind of impressed with him getting there and getting some players in there pretty quickly, man. It's been really impressive. I like it. I dig it. Dig it. Who'd you say was doing well? You said Wisconsin was doing well?
Yeah, they had some kids leave, but they got some decent kids as well.
I'm going to pull it up, man. I like this. I like kind of looking at some of the transfer portal pickups because the transfer portal is such a wild ride nowadays, too, man. Okay, yeah. So they got Tyler Van Dyke. They got Tackett Curtis, who was a USC kid, linebacker. John Pius, I think is how you pronounce his name. William and Mary pass rusher, was a really good player. Gene Thomas, Arkansas kid, transferred over there. He was at Cincinnati originally.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's not bad, man. I like it. Yeah, you've had several good ones. Oh, Taway Walker from Oklahoma, the running back, transferred there as well. You remember Sebastian Cheeks? Notre Dame recruited him for a while. North Carolina kid. He's
North Carolina kid. Now. He's out there now. Yeah.
Yeah, man. All right. Yeah. I dig it. All right, Wisconsin. All right. I like it. All right, let's go to. Really are, man. They really are. Let's go next to Andre Thompson. By the way, anybody had super chats? We got a few left, but if you want to throw in a couple more, please do it anytime. Andre Thompson says, I see that Marcus Freeman building that offensive line, defensive line players, just like Georgia, Alabama has right now. They just need experience in the system and continue to develop mentally and physically.
I mean, that's football, man. That's football. It's really, because you were listening on the show, and we actually talked about this earlier today, man, like how much credit the SEC as a conference needs to pay to Urban Meyer and Nick Saban. Right, because this SEC run didn't start until they got there. Yeah, like they brought this Midwest mentality of size, and then they just kind of put it in the gumbo with the speed from the SEC and the physical play, and all of a sudden, SEC started rattling off championships because they raised the level of everyone in the SEC when they went there. And Marcus Freeman he knows what it takes to win football games, big time football games. I mean, look, anybody that watches college football consistently knows what it takes to win.
Agreed.
In big games. So, and in that culture, like using Nick Saban as an example. Like if Keon Keeley knows, like, dude, don't even expect, unless you are superb, don't even expect to get snaps as a freshman. Not here. There's too much talent and too much development that goes on here. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, dude, pretty much, what was it? Deron Payne. Just think about all the great defensive tackles we've seen go to the NFL from Alabama. They really flashed for like 1 year. They all got their 1 year to shine, and they took advantage of it. And that is what it's like being in a culture like that. When you have depth and talent, you wait your turn, and you're comfortable waiting your turn. Now, that's why Nick might probably walked away, because he's like, the NIL has brought a sense of entitlement where guys feel like they should be playing. Like, nah, you earned that. You proved that,
No doubt.
And Marcus Freeman has, honestly, as much as we have wanted to see the young talented players, Marcus Freeman has kind of put that same thing into place. Like, I don't care how fast you are, how talented you are, you don't have to earn this.
Sure.
These snaps are earned in practice on a daily basis, and you have to respect that.
Yep. I agree. Yep. It's definitely there's definitely an innate feeling of having to earn things around the program which I love. I love that. Like, you need to be able to fight for what you want and then be rewarded for what you earn, right? Like, that stuff absolutely matters. I 100% agree there. And it just seemed like, by the way, the Kalen DeBoer stuff, it is official apparently, and he's officially signed, and he has let his team know that he will be taking the Alabama job. So Kalen DeBoer to Alabama is officially official. Brandon Plesner has one, Sean. Just a topic today is elite front seven haul. Defensive line seems to be on track, but where are we at with linebacker? The board is loaded, and the only player that seems to be trending to Notre Dame is Kia, the perceived lesser talented player. Well, Brandon, we broke that down, man. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown today. I think Notre Dame is going to be in a very good spot, linebacker, ultimately in the end. I will say this. I don't know if you agree with this, Sean. I feel better about linebacker recruiting today than I did this time last year. Last year, we were like, are they really like Kingston? But like, are they going to get Kingston?
That's true.
And then you're also like, okay, they're recruiting guys, like Bodie, and then Teddy came on the scene pretty later, as far as like this time last year. This time last year, man, like I was like, if you would ask me who are Notre Dame had a good spot with at linebacker, I'd be like, not sure, man. Not 100% sure there.
Yeah.
This year, I think there's a little bit more clarity than there was last year. So I think it'll end up being good. I think it'll end up being fine.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Let us now go to. I don't know how to answer this one, so let's just talk it out real quick. Andy Milton fan, which recruitment that had stalled should we keep an eye on? Nathan, I'm not really sure.
That's stalled. Well, you brought up one.
Yeah.
Earlier today with Jarquez.
Yeah, Jarquez Carter's
hit a lull a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Jarquez Carter's a good one. Surprised no one's asked about the Kevin Humes stuff. I don't know if you've heard about that recently, Sean, but I mean, kind of put that one out there, I guess. So he reclassified to 2024 cornerback out of St. Francis, Kevin Humes, who's taking a visit to Notre Dame later this month, Sean, is going to sign in February. There's been like a weird thing because Notre Dame, it was trending. Notre Dame was just like not pushing for him. And then he reclassified, and it seemed like Notre Dame was pushing for him. The only update I'll give you guys on Kevin Humes, and then we'll see how it works out, is I don't expect him to end up with Notre Dame. That's just kind of where I'm at with it. So
that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, and that's more on a Notre Dame side than I think a Kevin Humes side. And we'll just kind of leave it at that, and we'll talk about it a little more in depth when that situation kind of plays out. But yeah, I mean, otherwise though, Nathan, I mean, it's a good question. I think Jarquez is a good one because things kind of got quiet for a little bit there. I think wide receivers is going to be one that's going to pick up pretty quick. I don't have a direct answer because there really wasn't any wide receivers that were getting too much conversation during that transitional period, Sean, because it was like they wanted to get Mike Brown in and coaching the team and getting ready for bowl prep and everything. Over the next couple of weeks, though, I think that we'll hear a lot more buzz about guys like Taylor Taylor and Derek Meadows and Dalen McCutcheon's visit on the 20th and like those types of things, right? So I think wide receiver in general will be one that'll kick up, but I think that you hit one. Jarquez Carter, I think, is a really good answer there. All right, let us move on. We only have a couple more left, unless people want to throw in someone's late. Nathan also had another one, said, what are the most surprising good and bad recruitments in the 2024 class? Surprising recruitments. Sean, are there any players that signed with Notre Dame that you would say was a surprising recruitment? All right, here's one. I just talked about thinking back to last year. At this time last year, I did not think that Notre Dame was going to get Kingston Viliamoasa. So I guess that in theory was a little bit of a surprise that they were able to close on that one and make up the headway. Because at this time last year, Sean, I would have been like Ohio State's to lose probably, maybe USC, but like I would not have said Notre Dame would have been like a legit team for him.
Yeah. And I'll say on the other side, somebody that we talked about this last week.
Okay.
I think if we were surprised that Notre Dame didn't stay on Marquise Lightfoot.
Yeah, that was a weird evaluation. I know like Brian and us kind of see this one a little bit differently, but I'm much more on your side of like, I don't know why you didn't push for that kid.
Which
I'm
is
not
strange
really
because this time last year, they
in a
were
good
talking
spot.
to him really consistently, like weekly.
Yep.
Like Marquise Lightfoot, told IB, like, yo, I hear from Al Washington every week.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a mistake in retrospect. I mean, we'll see how it works out. We'll see how he plays at Miami and how the Notre Dame guys do. Maybe Notre Dame was right about that one, but it's tough for me to pass up 6'5" lengthy kids who are good fits right in Chicago, right? Like, I don't know, man. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see about that one though. But yeah, Lightfoot was a weird one as far as like just kind of going cold on him. Trying to think if there's anybody else even on the other side of it. Surprising. I don't know if I would say anybody else was really surprising. I'm trying to think through my mind here. Safeties. Well, this time last year, we didn't think Bronte would be an academic fit at Notre Dame, right? So that's a little surprising that
that's a
ended up like that,
surprise.
right? That's a good
I'll
one.
say this.
Yeah.
The way the CJ Carr situation went down was very surprising.
Yes.
Based upon what we knew, yes, and how it happened, how quickly it happened.
Yeah. That's a good one.
That's
Kedron Young was probably a little surprising too. I mean, like I thought Notre Dame maybe had a shot, but like Texas kid, like I don't know. He didn't
No,
really
that
talk
was
to
once
media
again
much.
because remember, this is when Notre Dame was talking to kids like Darion Dupree out of Chicago, who ended up at
Yes.
Wisconsin, and kids that we liked.
Yep.
We went over that film on this show,
Liked
and
him,
then all of a sudden, Kedron Young came into the picture, and that's Dylan McCullough, man. Just that's what he does. Like he'll be on kids, and then all of a sudden, he'll see a kid that's like next level, and he's locked on to that kid, right? We saw it with the way he went after Jeremiah Love in the previous class in 23. So, that's just another tip of the cap. Another tip of the cap that Dylan McCullough and the way he recruits. All right, let's get to the next one. I hope I can pull these up. No, I cannot pull these up. So we have one from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Thinking players who aren't seeing the field will transfer in the spring. Should Notre Dame take larger classes in recruiting? Do fewer transfers to stay for the degree? I think this class is going to be one of the biggest classes. So that's kind of on brand with what you're saying, Salty. 25, 26 kids is what we're thinking with this class. So I think this will be one of those classes. But I think also what you're seeing, and this might relate to the Kevin Humes situation and what Ryan was just talking about with him reclassifying. Like they love the 25 class so much, and they love the possibilities in the 25 class. That's one of the interesting things about like recruiting, right? What coaching staffs like compare years, and they're like, you know what? Let's just take our shot at this position or several positions with the 25 class because we like the 25 class more than we like the 24 class. It's a very interesting situation. I went to the next one just so you know, if you can bring it up with Salty.
Oh, Salty's asking. Got it.
Yeah, I couldn't pull it up, but I just went ahead.
I know. I felt so bad. I hit my wire and then my audio just went out and it wouldn't let me reconnect. It was fantastic. Yeah, it was
because
great.
usually I come in another way and I'm able to pull them up, but
yeah, I got you, man. No worries.
But yeah, you can go ahead because I pretty much just talked about it. Like this class is going to be a larger class for Notre Dame.
Yep.
And with it being larger class, larger classes, you lose. You're gonna lose some in the current landscape of college football, right? It is what it is. If you bring in 26, you're lucky if 18 stay.
Yep.
The full term out of the 25, 26. So I mean, defections are simply going to happen, but kids at Notre Dame do tend to stay longer for the degree. So,
Agreed.
You'll probably get kids, but then, kids at Notre Dame, 2.5 years, they're on track to graduate.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So Steve Angeli's probably right there.
Yeah, probably. He might be, because I mean, even like Nana had his master's degree, and he did 5 years, right? It was like wild, dude, that they were able to do that. Another interesting recruitment that I was thinking of, Sean, while I was getting reconnected was the Carter Nelson recruitment was weird. That was a weird recruitment, man. That was a weird one. I
overall, it really was a back and forth, right? Because you felt really confident that Notre Dame had him at a certain point.
So at one point, it was Notre Dame and Georgia were the teams, right? Like those were the teams. And I had literally been told by someone that he doesn't really want to stay at home. Like that's not really his thing. And then all of a sudden he commits to Nebraska, where you're just like, hey, it literally took me off guard. And then apparently at that point there was like a big jockeying with people around him, and Nebraska commits to trying to keep him at home and him be like the hometown hero type of thing in Nebraska or whatever. So then he commits to Nebraska, and despite that, Notre Dame kept talking to him, right? Kept talking to him, kept recruiting him. And then he went on that visit, Sean. You remember when he went on the visit
came back during the
USC?
season? Yeah.
Against USC, dude. And they blew out USC. At that point, I was like, Carter Nelson's going to flip to Notre Dame. He's going to flip to Notre Dame. I know it. And he still didn't, man. That was a weird recruitment. That was a weird one. Yeah. That was a really weird one. I think he's going to do great at Nebraska, but that was an odd one, man. I thought he was going to I thought he was going to flip at least once. I thought he was going to go to Notre Dame or Georgia at one point, and then all of a sudden he's staying at home. So
staying at home.
Yeah. Last one, unless we get something late. Andrew Van said you can bring one player or coach back from the past 10 years to solidify the 2024 team. Who do you bring back?
Oh man, that's honestly, I think that's the easy answer, but go ahead.
I was going to say Quentin Nelson.
Yeah.
Quentin Nelson was going to be my pick. Because I think the quarterback position is going to be very good. I do. I'm in a Riley Leonard. I think the running backs are going to be dynamic. I think the wide receivers are going to be very improved. Tight ends will always be good. And I think the defense overall is going to be very good. The only other thought I would have is to maybe a defensive lineman that can add a little bit of pressure, but it is Quentin Nelson for me, because that is still the position, Sean, that I have the most question marks about. I think offensive tackle is going to be fine. Seeing Charles Jagasaw in the bowl game, I'm like, all right. Or sorry, the artist formerly known as Charles Jagasaw, seeing him in a tackle, seeing Ashton Craig, seeing Billy Schrouth, I think right tackle is going to be fine. I think it's going to be fine, whether it's Emil or Tosh or whatever. That one guard spot, though, I'm kind of looking at it and I'm like,
so basically, man, Pat Coogan is catching strays today. That's what's happening.
I mean, a little bit. I mean, it's like, no disrespect to Pat Coogan, but Quentin Nelson's a different breed. You know what I mean? He's a different cat. So, could you imagine if I throw in a Quentin Nelson at left guard next to Charles Jagasaw? Imagine how many dudes you're gonna be moving around on that the offensive line.
That's pretty scary, my man.
Yeah,
I know I wouldn't want to be a defensive end on that side.
No. Who was your pick, though? Who's your pick?
I was gonna say Ronnie Stanley.
That's a good one too.
Yeah,
that's a good one too.
I was gonna say Ronnie Stanley.
That would have been my second pick. I was thinking about Ronnie. I was thinking offensive tackle just in general.
Yeah,
honestly, I may have just brought Joe Alt back again.
And I say that because I actually like the young. I like the young interior guys. Right, I'm not even looking at the guy you might focus on, because I like the guys behind. I like Sullivan Ashford. Right, I like Pendleton. I like the guys they have from the 23 class. So, and I like the guys they have in the 24 class. So I think there's young talent there that should push and possibly overtake, in the spring or in the fall in camp. But, we'll have to see about that one. But
that's a great question, though.
I like
that question.
Great question.
And someone just said Bobby S said Keon Keeley? ?
I think that's.
I dig it, man. Hey, man, if Keon Keeley wanted to come Notre Dame, guys, you know my answer would
take
be
him in a heartbeat.
Yeah, you come back. I don't know what Keon. I don't know what his intentions were. I mean, we'll see what happens, man. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I know that Alabama players are going to have 30 days of an open window to make a decision if they want to enter the portal or not. If Keon enters the portal, and come back and ask me, Bobby, and then we could talk about if Notre Dame's had any contact or the other type of stuff. I have no idea what Keon's intentions are, though, right now. Zero. I mean, it'd be great, but I have no idea right now. But that's going to do it, folks, here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Before you leave, if you could just hit that like button for us, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. Notification bells on the bottom of the screen for YouTube followers. If you're listening to your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. I'm going to have an update on Josiah Kia's visit this weekend. I'm going to have some more additions to the visitor list for the junior day on January 20th. And we'll, of course, have as much recruiting and team intel as we possibly can for you all there at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So that's Sean Davis. I'm Ryan Roberts. Again, we appreciate you all so much for joining the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.